Fran sits quietly, watching a couple of tiny fairies fly around her. But the moment is ruined when she tells Ark to stop messing with her hair just because he's bored. Ark just shrugs it off, saying it's her fault for taking so long to find what they need. He leans in and calls her name, pointing at the screen to show her which one he likes best. He looks pretty hyped while mentioning that the flavor he had before was actually delicious, so Fran just smiles and hums to herself while she gets everything ready on the tablet. She brings out the seasonal fruit and custard tart he asked for, confirming the order for Lord Ark. Ark tells her she did a good job and starts digging into the snack right there on the throne. Fran watches him, thinking about how crazy it is that a powerful dragon actually has a sweet tooth. He smirks while licking his finger, a reminder that despite looking like a guy, his true form is anything but human. Ark is actually a massive black dragon known for bringing disaster since way back, and Francesca was originally sent to him as a human sacrifice, but things turned out way different. She realizes how crazy it is to be sitting on his lap and using a nickname for a literal legend, and honestly, anyone seeing them like this would think the whole setup is pretty weird. Francesca knows her life would basically be over if she ever actually got on his bad side, but seeing him so focused on a tablet menu makes her second guess how scary he really is. She decides to stop worrying about the heavy stuff and just focus on testing her special food skill. So she grabs a fork and digs in, immediately losing it over how good the first bite tastes. The crust is super crunchy and basically perfect. She can't get over how amazing the texture is. She notices the sweet pastry flavor and the smell of roasted almonds, making the whole snack a total win. Francesca is totally in the zone, thinking about how the rich custard cream wraps around the pastry, and as she tastes the milk and vanilla, the whole thing just melts on her tongue with a mix of sweet and sour fruit. Ark just stands there looking confused while she goes into full fangirl mode over the snack, making her feel like there's a literal festival going on in her mouth because of how well all the flavors work together. Ark mentions that the soft cream really makes the crunch of the pastry stand out, and Francesca agrees that the mild tartness is just right, though she makes a mental note that he's actually not the biggest fan of sour stuff in general. She looks over the other treats like the macarons and chocolates, thinking the fruit and cream are great, but something else is on her mind, and she realizes the best parts are actually the crispy, well-baked corners where all the flavor gets concentrated. Ark watches her smiling and says he kind of gets her logic, but then he notices something and stops mid-sentence, suddenly reaching out to hand her a massive, glowing gem. Francesca is completely stunned and can barely even get a word out as he just casually tells her that the jewel is her compensation for everything. Francesca thinks about how her special skill needs points from gold or gems to work. Ever since Lord Ark found that out, he's been handing them over whenever he feels like it. She stares at the huge jewel in her hand, thinking it's pretty crazy to get paid like this, especially since she's supposed to be a sacrifice who was just begging to stay alive. Lord Ark leans in closer to see what's up and asks if the gem he gave her isn't enough for what she needs. He mentions the whole setup feels a bit backward, but Francesca is quick to tell him that the jewel is actually way more than enough. She tells him a smaller one would have worked fine too, but Lord Ark just admits he doesn't have anything smaller on him right now. He gives her a little smile and says if it ends up being too much, she can just save the leftovers for next time. Francesca gets a bit flustered and says she'll take it then, holding the gem up to her glowing screen, and as she whispers that she humbly accepts the gift, the jewel starts to sink right into the screen's surface. A message pops up in the air confirming the conversion is finished, which makes Francesca look super excited while she realizes just how useful this skill of hers actually is. Lord Ark looks at her and says the people from the country that kicked her out must have been totally blind. Francesca looks down at her screen and says that looking back on how things went, she's actually glad they decided to get rid of her. She holds her tablet close to her chest and mentions how she used to be treated like she was completely useless. But Lord Ark points out that there are so many amazing treats here that even he has never tasted before. He says it's crazy they called her useless when she can produce all this food, and that humans are just strange creatures, taking a massive bite out of a fruit tart. He tells her that her skill is something he wouldn't even hesitate to trade his whole treasure pile for, which makes Francesca give him a genuine smile, while she softly thanks him. The two of them just relax on the throne together while fairies fly around with more sweets. Lord Ark looks at the girl sitting before him and asks if she's really the flower sacrifice that was offered. He leans in close with a smirk, telling Francesca that he expects her to serve him to the absolute best of her ability. Flash forward to now, Francesca holds out a fresh box of treats while calling out his name. She teases him about how he's become totally helpless without her around to help, while Lord Ark just stands there looking flustered. Francesca gives him a playful look and says he really should just be honest and admit it, letting out a little laugh, but Lord Ark just grunts and turns away. immediately getting stuck trying to open a small snack wrapper. He tells Fran to stop laughing and actually help him with the package, so she reminds him that she already told him to use the notch. He finally gets it open and takes a bite, admitting that the treat is actually pretty delicious. Lord Ark notices her expression and asks what she's finds so funny, and Francesca just smiles, saying she was only thinking about how peaceful things have been lately. Everything changes in an instant when Francesca is told her engagement is officially over. Her father drops the news that Prince Theodore is getting engaged to Elijah instead, and Theodore just looks at her with this weak smile and says he's sorry, standing there like some perfect blonde prince next to a beautiful honey blonde girl. To anyone else, they look like a perfect couple straight out of a fairy tale. But Elijah puts on this act, looking all upset while telling her sister how sorry she is. Francesca realizes the two people she trusted most just completely betrayed her, and then her father twists the knife, saying her unique skill is actually trash since nobody can even read it. He asks if it isn't obvious that someone as pretty as Ellie is better suited to be a duchess, even without any powers, especially since Theodore claims he's finally found true love and just can't bring himself to lie to his heart anymore. Theodore looks Francesca right in the eye and tells her he just can't do it anymore. He says he can't lie to himself and marry her when Elijah jumps in with the real kicker, claiming she's already pregnant with the prince's baby. She looks at Francesca with this nasty, fake sad face and says no amount of bowing or acting sorry is going to change anything now. Francesca just sits there, totally drained, thinking about how Theodore was supposed to give up his royal title to join her family and be her husband, but it all makes sense now. She finally realizes why he was never around the capital, since he was busy messing around with her sister while she was doing all the hard work. Her father doesn't care about her feelings though, and says they have to cover this up because a broken engagement would be a massive scandal for their name. So he brings up the fact that the flower offering ceremony is conveniently happening this year. He tells Francesca they're going to tell everyone she was chosen for the ritual, and that's why the marriage plans had to change. This ceremony only happens once every 50 years, where they send a girl to some far-off island to keep a lonely dragon company, but the reality is a lot scarier. It's actually a human sacrifice to a powerful, cursed black dragon just to buy the kingdom a few years of peace. The father explains that centuries ago, when the kingdom stopped the offerings, they got hit with every disaster from famine to civil war, which is why the ritual has never stopped once since then. Francesca takes the news quietly and just asks when she's supposed to leave, so the answer comes back immediately: she's heading out tomorrow morning. Theodore tells her she better get ready while her father calls her a useless thing, saying she should be honored to be the dragon's bride. Francesca looks away from them and simply says she understands. She gives a final bow, saying her entire life has only ever been for the sake of the family name, and as she walks down the long, empty hall, the reality hits: in 3 days, she's going to die as a sacrifice. It's clear to her now that her father always liked her sister more because she was the kid from the wife he actually loved. So she remembers how her grandfather was the only one left who truly cared for her after her mother passed away. Francesca looks up at the sky, wondering if her life would have turned out any different if she could just use her skill. Back in her room, Francesca lies across her bed, hiding her face, thinking about how people with skills are supposed to be blessed by God. The problem is she can't even figure out what her own blessing is, which reminds her of her father's voice constantly calling her useless since she can't use it. She curls up on the bed, wondering when she started feeling like a stranger in her own home. It's always been Elijah who gets all the attention and gifts, while her sister enjoys the fancy dresses, expensive jewelry, and a house full of servants. Worst of all, Elijah is the only one who actually feels the love of their family, but Francesca shakes it off and tells herself she can handle things on her own. She tries to stay upbeat, claiming she doesn't even need a maid because she's just that capable. Francesca thinks back to how her grandfather actually took the time teaching her administrative duties in the capital before her debut, so she was actually prepared to manage the territory as a duchess once Theodore became a subject. But now she's just lying there, clutching the sheets, and trying to tell herself she's actually really capable. She realizes the only reason she had to learn all that was because her father was always busy, spending every second with her stepmother and half-sister instead, leaving Francesca to close her eyes and wonder if being able to use skills is even that big of a deal. Suddenly, a girl with huge, sparkling eyes pops up and shouts that it's actually a massive deal. The girl starts going off about how the person two-timing is the one in the wrong, calling that true love talk total trash. She gets even more heated, screaming about what the guy's problem was with Fran, who worked so hard to be worthy, only for him to fall for that little sister's games, and Francesca just stands there looking completely confused, asking if this Fran person is even supposed to be her. The girl doesn't stop, yelling about how much she suffered all alone, and how nobody knows a damn thing while she takes her anger out on a pillow. The author girl starts screaming at the top of her lungs, telling everyone that this is exactly what they deserve for how they acted. Listening to her, Francesca finally starts to realize that she's right. She really did spend her whole life working as hard as she possibly could. She thinks about how she pushed herself just so no one would ever call her useless, doing everything for her family and Prince Theodore, hoping that it would stop them from looking down on her. She spent years desperately mastering etiquette and magic, surrounding herself with stacks of books, until the author girl turns her anger on Francesca instead. She shouts that Francesca is being just as bad by giving up on herself so easily. The girl starts losing it and slamming a pillow around, yelling that it's completely normal to be furious when a fiancé cheats like that. Francesca just watches her with soft eyes, telling the girl she's a pretty strange person, getting this worked up for someone else's sake. The girl flops back onto the bed totally drained, saying she just wishes Francesca could remember her, but that's when a thought hits her. It wasn't some random mystery after all. She realizes with a shock that Francesca's skills are actually written in Japanese. Francesca stands there framed by the light as the truth of her situation finally starts to come into focus. Francesca starts looking back at her life from a long time ago, back when she was known as the daughter of the Wyrant's ducal family. But it turns out there's more to it. The author girl admits she was just a corporate worker in her 30s who died without a name, leading Francesca to realize this girl was actually her in a past life, though the girl jokes her new name is probably some long religious title. She explains that this past life is like a bug in the system that never got deleted, which is the reason why Francesca's skills are in Japanese. She apologizes for making things so difficult, and Francesca holds her hands together, finally feeling like she wasn't actually alone this whole time. She looks up with a soft smile, knowing her other self has been right there beside her through everything. The two of them share a hug as her past self tells her to smile, calling her a part of herself. Francesca stares into the mirror, feeling like a completely different person now that she's found herself. Taryn flashes a smile while apologizing for the rough times the bug caused, but she promises it's actually going to be super helpful from here on out. And Francesca looks at the skill labeled Mail Order and thinks it's definitely one of the more interesting powers she's seen, making her realize how crazy it is that she couldn't even read the text until yesterday, while her past self just hangs out in the back. She reads the description about trading cash and metals for points to get food from another world, so she pulls out the ring Theodore gave her with that basic letter and decides there's no reason to keep wearing it anymore. The screen flashes as the ring turns into 10,000 order points, and a little notification pops up saying she can check her total balance whenever. Francesca is pretty impressed by the payout, and Taryn points out that a prince's gift should at least be worth that much, leading Francesca to double-check if the shop is strictly for food, drinks, and kitchen stuff, which is a bit of a puzzle because even though she has Taryn's memories to explain the items, none of this stuff exists in her world yet. She reaches out to the screen, deciding the first step is just to pick something out and see how it goes. Francesca hesitates for a second before the system asks if she's ready to buy the item, so she just goes for it and says yes. And a cold cup of ice cream appears right in her hands, leaving her totally shocked that it's exactly like the picture. She mentions that the price seems pretty fair for what she got, while Taryn suggests picking up a special metal spoon to make eating it easier, making Francesca realize how crazy it is to have something this convenient at her fingertips. So she decides to pick out a new spoon, and when Taryn asks if she wants it in blue, she's all about it. Taryn admits she thought pink was the vibe since Theodore always gave her pink gifts, but Francesca just laughs and says blue is actually her favorite, which Taryn totally gets, smiling and saying it's a really nice choice. Now that everything is ready, Francesca says it's time to dig in while Taryn cheers her on to start eating, revealing a bowl filled with fresh fruit slices and perfect ice cream, just waiting to be tasted. Francesca looks at the treat with her eyes sparkling, saying she can't believe how beautiful it actually looks. Francesca takes a big bite of the ice cream and the cold hits her immediately. It's so sharp it feels like it's piercing her brain, but in a good way. She notices how smooth and silky the texture is, realizing it's way better than any of the fancy frozen desserts she had back at the royal palace. The simple sweetness of the milk and sugar washes over her, and she honestly feels like she's tasting pure happiness for the first time. As she eats, she starts thinking about how everyone used to call her useless, even though she tried so hard to be the perfect girl for them. Tears start rolling down her face because she's just so happy that, for once, she actually got to choose something she liked all by herself. She wipes her eyes and sits up on the bed, telling herself that she's done with the crying. She's not just going to give up and let things happen. Francesca remembers who she really is, the daughter of a proud duke and the granddaughter of a man they used to call the Lion of the Battlefield. She clenches her fist with a look of total determination, vowing to make everyone regret the day they messed with her and woke up the lion cub. Taryn starts cheering her on from the sidelines while Francesca gets completely fired up, looking like she's ready to take on the world. Taryn gives a bit of a sheepish smile and apologizes for everything, admitting that it definitely took her way too long to finally wake up. Taryn starts getting down on herself, saying it's her fault for staying behind, but Francesca tells her to stop. There's no reason for her to feel responsible for any of this since Taryn keeps rolling around on the bed, complaining that if she had just figured out the skill sooner, Francesca would have been treated way better by everyone. Francesca looks down at the magic glowing in her hand. She's not so sure about that, just quietly wondering if things really would have changed, because she remembers her father bragging about how she must be favored by the gods for having such a rare skill, even claiming that the whole country would prosper once she became queen. Taryn sighs from the bed, saying it's likely they just used those sweet words to trick that idiot Prince Theodore into aiming for the throne, and Francesca just gives a tired little smile, admitting that things probably wouldn't have ended well for her either way. But then Taryn gets a serious look on her face. She mentions that tomorrow is the big day and asks Francesca if she's really okay with being sacrificed. Francesca closes her eyes and says yeah, but she surprisingly doesn't feel scared or lonely right now, mostly because Taryn asks if it's because she's planning on dealing everyone a massive blow right at the very end to get her payback. So Francesca tells her that's definitely part of the plan, and they both end up laughing about it together. Francesca looks up at the crescent moon and decides it's time to test out some point-saving tricks for her mail-order skill. She starts walking through the stone courtyard, heading deep into the building to put her plan into motion. She double-checks her soundproofing magic first to make sure she doesn't make a single noise while moving around, and once that's set, she toggles on her night vision so she can see every detail inside the dark treasure room. Taryn mentions how useful magic is, and Francesca just smiles, bragging that her huge mana pool makes her way better at this than most. She explains that she can even pull off short-range teleports to sneak into the treasury and use infinite storage magic to hold the loot. Francesca looks at a massive diamond in her hand, thinking even this isn't enough to pay for all the trouble the prince caused, so Taryn starts fuming, shouting that they need to take everything as payback for the broken engagement and the crappy way her family treated her. She says they should grab every last cent and all the back wages Francesca is owed for the work she did. And Francesca realizes she's totally right. They're definitely going to make sure they get what they're owed before leaving. Francesca decides they should grab all the furniture from her room too, since it might actually come in handy later on, and she explains how getting Taryn's memories back gave her a real plan to stay alive basically. She's realized that before she ends up getting eaten, she needs to find all the delicious food the world has to offer. So she's going to use her powers to order gourmet stuff from another world specifically to keep the evil dragon fed. And she's officially naming this the 1001 Nights plan, while looking more determined than ever. Francesca stops to think about how if she just ran away, some other girl would just be sacrificed instead, which would be awful, so she starts tossing her things into a magical portal, figuring her magic gives her enough of a chance to fight back. She knows there's no guarantee her plan will actually work out in the end, but she feels like trying something is still way better than just sitting around doing nothing at all. Moving back to her own room, she feels a bit dizzy because it's so plain compared to the treasury. There's nothing sparkly in here. Francesca sits on her bed and realizes she's probably the only duke's daughter in the world with a bed that creaks this much. She used to tell herself this room was a luxury because she felt so useless, but now she sees how bad it really is. Author girl starts losing it, yelling that Francesca should have just used her magic to get back at everyone a long time ago. Francesca admits she'd love to give her past self a piece of her mind, but she knows why she acted that way and remembers that after losing her mother, she was desperate for her father's love, even if it meant holding herself back. She honestly believed that if she just stayed a good girl, she'd eventually get the praise she wanted so badly. She spent all those years thinking that if she just learned enough magic and stayed quiet while working hard, she'd finally be loved by her family one day. But looking back now, she realizes that was just a dream. The only people who actually cared about her were her mother and her grandfather, the only ones who ever truly saw her for who she was. Francesca decides she has to let her grandfather know everything that's been happening, so she stays up late writing a letter about her engagement being cancelled and her role as the new sacrifice. She also mentions how she can finally use her skill, even though she knows her grandfather can't actually get there in time to help. She just wants to be honest before she goes, and thanks him for being the one person who truly saw her feeling bad that she spent so much time crying over her father's lack of love instead of appreciating him. Francesca holds the letter close and says she's headed to the dragon's side, then uses her magic to send it, watching the glowing bird fly into the night sky as she announces she's going to tame the beast herself. The sun comes up and she's still sitting in her creaky bed. Turns out she didn't sleep for a single second. She isn't even tired though since she's so pumped up, saying she actually feels totally refreshed and ready, But author girl just sighs about how nice being young is, since apparently it's all downhill once you turn 25. Francesca puts on the light green dress her mother wore as a young girl. It's the perfect look to give her the courage she needs for what's coming next. Author girl tells her she looks great, and Francesca just smiles and thanks Taryn, but the moment doesn't last because it's time to move. As they head down the stairs, author girl asks if she's nervous, and Francesca admits she is thinking about how she might die soon, yet she still has to deal with her dad's fake drama. She asks if the whole thing isn't just pitiful, which makes author girl laugh about how much her personality has changed, right before she steps out to face her family waiting at the bottom. Francesca thanks them for raising her, but her dad just tells her to not embarrass the family name, so she gives a polite reply while realizing Theodore didn't even care enough to show up. Her father's face twists with anger as he tells her she looks just like her dead mother when she acts like that, claiming that woman spent her whole life looking down on him with nothing but arrogance. He stares at the dress she's wearing and can't believe she still has that same defiant look on her face. It's clearly getting under his skin that he can't break her spirit. Francesca looks away for a second and tells him the truth, that her mother actually spent all those years trying her best to reach out to him, but he was too stuck in his own head to see it. She straight up asks him just how blind he could have been back then. And while her father and Elijah stand there looking completely stunned by her new attitude, author girl is in the background making faces and mocking them. But the piece doesn't last because Elijah leans in with a fake smug smile on her face. She asks her sister if she's ready for a little reality check, wondering how it feels to have her fiancé stolen and then get sent off to die as a sacrifice. She tells Francesca she must be feeling absolutely miserable right now, but Francesca just stares back, repeating the word miserable to herself like she's heard the funniest joke in the world. As she gets ready to leave with the priests, she realizes she's actually happy to be done with Theodore, calling him a horny ape for cheating on her. And she's glad to be away from the thieving cat who tried to take everything she had. A small, genuine smile finally crosses her face as she admits to herself that she actually feels completely relieved to be leaving it all behind. Elijah completely loses her cool and yells at Francesca for what she said, but Francesca just stays totally chill, wishing her luck on actually trying to be a proper lady for once. Elijah keeps screaming about Francesca's smug face, trying to convince herself that her sister is secretly terrified inside, but it's clear she's just projecting. She tells Francesca that if she grovels on the floor and begs for her life right now, she might actually consider talking to their father for her. But Francesca just holds up a hand and shuts her down with a quick, "No thank you," making it clear she's done with the drama. She tells them straight up that she doesn't need help from humans like them to survive, leaving Elijah standing there totally speechless and confused. One of the priests holds up a large staff and lets everyone know that the preparations are finally finished and they're ready to move. Suddenly, Francesca is surrounded by a burst of flowers as she realizes she's actually awakened a special skill, and she looks pretty happy about it. Her father looks like he's having a total meltdown, yelling that there's no way she could have actually gotten a skill of her own. Francesca just laughs and asks if he's surprised, saying that sometimes the best powers only show up when someone is pushed to their absolute limit. As she starts to walk away for good, she thinks back on all those exhausting years she wasted just trying to get her father to love her, but all that's over now. Francesca takes a firm step forward, finally realizing that all her old worries were just a total waste of time. She's over it and thinks about how things might have been different if her father had just cared a little, especially since she worked so hard for his name. But she stops dwelling on the past and tells him to just go enjoy his life with her stepmother and Elijah, leaving them behind for good. Her father stands there looking completely shocked, barely able to get her name out as he watches his daughter walk away like this. While he's still trying to process everything, Francesca turns her attention to the rest of the people watching and tells the whole crowd to give their best wishes to the new couple, making sure to mention that the groom is a cheater and the bride is a backstabber. She gives one last happy smile before saying her final goodbye to everyone. She's officially done with this place and heads straight for the massive cave entrance in the woods, standing there at the edge of the darkness all by herself. As she looks into the tunnel, she wonders if the evil dragon is actually waiting for her somewhere deep inside the lair. So she starts heading in, but then her eyes go wide when she spots a strange light coming from the shadows. Francesca's shoes crunch over the rough cave floor. She thinks about how the path is really bumpy and notices the air feels gross, lukewarm, and damp. She covers her nose, wondering what that weird smell is when she suddenly sees a skeleton sitting right there in the dark. She nearly loses it, but tries to keep her cool, stuttering to herself to just relax. She takes a breath and tells herself to get it together, then looks closer at the skeleton's ripped clothes. She notices it's wearing a fancy dress and wonders if this was the woman sacrificed right before her. She drops to her knees to check things out and looks for bite marks on the neck, but she realizes the wounds don't actually look like bites at all. She thinks the marks look more like someone used a blade, which makes her wonder if a dragon even did this. But she hears a noise and realizes something is heading her way. It's some kind of voice, but it definitely isn't human. So Francesca hides behind a rock while some dark, monstrous legs start walking into the cave. Two goblins in scrap armor creep through the cave, weapons ready, and Francesca notices the one-handed sword they're carrying. She starts to put the pieces together and stares at the skeleton, wondering if these monsters were the ones who actually killed her. She questions if a goblin murdered the girl meant for the dragon, and if that's the case, the peace the world has seen for the last 50 years might be based on a lie. But suddenly she freezes, her heart starts thumping because she realizes she's been spotted. Francesca huddles against the rock, telling herself she can't die here before she even gets to feed the dragon. She tries to calm her nerves and starts gathering magic in her hands, whispering that she can do this. Just then, the goblins leap over the rocks with their daggers raised. Francesca sees them and lets it rip, yelling out her explosive flame gale spell as fire blasts everywhere. Francesca realizes this is her only shot to escape, so she tells herself she has to get out fast, but as she tries to make a break for it, she ends up tripping and hitting the ground hard. Her body is totally spent, and she admits to herself that her legs have finally hit their limit, leaving her looking down to see that the heel of her boot actually snapped right off. Looking at the rest of her outfit, she sees that her clothes are all torn up and ruined too, so she sits there wondering if she even brought a sewing kit to fix the mess she's in. Francesca tries to shake it off, saying it's fine and that she just has to keep pushing forward, and then she stops and takes a look around, asking herself where she even is right now. She finds herself standing among these massive stone pillars and wonders if she stumbled into a temple, but then she spots something hiding further inside the darkness and decides to check it out. Francesca stops dead in her tracks as two massive, glowing eyes stare her down from the dark, and then a heavy voice asks if she's the one who just woke it up from its sleep. The dragon leans in close, calling her a child of man while showing off a row of huge, sharp teeth, so it looks her right in the eye and asks again if she's the one who disturbed its rest. She looks tiny standing there in the middle of the ruined temple, facing off against the giant creature. Francesca immediately drops into a bow and says her name is Francesca Wyrins, the current flower sacrifice. Staying low, she adds that she's pleased to make its acquaintance, but the dragon just stands there silently, looming over her and watching her every move. Francesca starts shaking, begging the dragon to say something because holding a deep bow after sprinting is pure agony, and with her legs totally shot, she's terrified she's going to fall over and faceplant right there. The dragon sounds completely confused, asking her what a hana is supposed to be, while he demands to know what's going on and tells her to get off the ground and start talking. Francesca looks up with tears in her eyes and asks if she can explain everything, so she starts telling him all about the tradition of the dragon's flower offering, and how a black dragon showed up on this island ages ago, bringing nothing but war and disasters. Apparently, the only way to make the chaos stop was to offer up a young girl as a sacrifice. The dragon listens as she explains that for the last 50 years, they've kept sending a flower here, and Francesca tells him that she's the one chosen for the current generation. But the dragon just shuts her down immediately, saying he knows nothing about any of that. And while he's been on this land forever, he just woke up and definitely hasn't done anything to any maidens. Lord Ark makes it clear that he doesn't have the power to control nature or start any plagues, and he says the whole evil dragon thing is just a case of humans overthinking things way too much. Francesca realizes she kind of saw this coming ever since she got her memories of Terran back. It all starts making sense since he's just a dragon with a huge body and way too much magic power. She figures that just him moving around or looking for food probably caused enough accidental damage to wreck a whole village. So any stories about things getting better after a sacrifice were likely just a total coincidence, especially since he got stuck with the evil label while he was just sleeping the whole time. Francesca looks at him and realizes he's actually a victim in all of this too. But if that's really the way it is, then she starts to wonder what the point even was of her being sent here as a sacrifice in the first place. Lord Ark doesn't hold back, telling her she's honestly pretty pitiful for offering herself up over a bunch of nonsense like that. Francesca speaks up and tells him that she actually had her own reasons for being here. And honestly, when she thinks about it, being sent away like this finally freed her from that terrible house. She realizes that in this new situation, she can finally just be herself instead of playing a role. Lord Ark rubs his chin and mentions that since he was asleep for such a long time, he's actually starving. And since she's supposed to be the flower sacrifice meant for him, he wonders if it's fine to just eat her. Francesca doesn't panic at all and tells him she has a pretty great idea to solve that problem. She gets all fired up and explains to the dragon that she actually comes from a totally different world, and because of that, she has the special ability to order some of the most amazing food he's ever seen. Lord Ark looks her over and asks if she's really trying to trade delicious food for her life, but after thinking about it for a second, he just gives in and agrees to the deal. Lord Ark looks right at the girl and tells her to bring him an offering of milk, honey, and spices, since that's what shrine maidens have given to the gods for ages. So if she wants to live, she better hand them over. Francesca grips her tablet and says she understands the deal, she's ready to make it happen. But Lord Ark stops her for a second to ask if that's really the right outfit for a girl acting as a sacrifice. She starts sweating, wondering if she somehow made him mad, and quickly begins to apologize for her look. Magic suddenly surrounds her as Lord Ark tells her to take this parting gift and struggle hard in the afterlife, so she looks down and realizes her clothes are suddenly sparkling clean, which is a huge relief. Francesca looks up with huge eyes and thanks him, promising that she'll definitely find a way to repay him. She starts walking and goes over the list of ingredients in her head: milk, honey, and spices, then sits down on a crate to search her tablet for one specific item that has all three. Francesca scrolls through her tablet and finally finds the perfect recipe. It's exactly what she needs. She rushes back to Lord Ark with a huge smile and thanks him for being patient while she worked, since she's holding a box of food that makes Lord Ark wonder if this really counts as the milk, honey, and spices he asked for. Francesca explains that it's vanilla-scented dough that's been deep-fried and covered in a thick glaze made of milk and honey. She opens the box to show off the fresh honey milk donuts. They're literally sparkling under the light. The sweet scent of honey and vanilla fills the air, and Francesca realizes how hard it is to resist a treat like this after running. Lord Ark looks at her pretty suspiciously, so she asks if he's worried about the donuts being poisoned, but the dragon just gives her a look and says there isn't a poison in existence that could actually lay a finger on him. Still, he says it would piss him off if he was the only one eating something toxic, so he tells her she's taking the first bite. He points his sharp claw at the box and picks out the specific donut he wants her to try, the one right in the middle. Francesca points out that if poison doesn't even work on him, having a poison taster is kind of useless, but she still thanks him for picking one out for her. She mentions it's actually pretty annoying that he thinks she'd poison the food, so author girl pops up and tells her to wrap the donut in thin paper so she doesn't get her hands all messy. Francesca holds the donut and says she's going to go ahead and eat it, and then she takes a huge bite. Her whole face lights up because she's completely blown away by the taste. It's like the vanilla scent just takes over while the crazy sweetness of the honey and milk starts melting on her tongue. The dough is super light and fluffy, making it the perfect match for that really sweet icing on top. She's dying to take another bite, but she doesn't even want to open her mouth because she wants to keep the flavor in there as long as possible. Lord Ark is literally drooling while he watches her, admitting it looks like the food isn't poisoned after all, which leads Francesca to tell him he doesn't have to eat it if he's not feeling it. Lord Ark just stares, wondering if it's actually that good. Francesca starts laughing in this really sneaky way, making Lord Ark look at her like she's crazy and ask what's up with that laugh. She doesn't say anything and just tosses a donut his way. Lord Ark immediately loses it and tells her to give him some too. While he's stuffing his face and wondering how something this good even exists in this world, Francesca mentions it's actually food from another world. She plays it cool and says it's kind of a shame, but tells him that since it's from another world, there's no way he can get these sweets unless she's around to make them. Lord Ark is totally caught off guard. Meanwhile, Francesca and author girl are low-key high-fiving because the dragon fell for their trap. The dragon goes quiet for a second before admitting he finally understands how powerful her cooking skill actually is, so Francesca looks up at him and makes a deal. She'll give him any food he wants for the rest of her life. Lord Ark closes his eyes and agrees to the terms, and then he addresses her by name, officially announcing that he is the Black Dragon Arquilarg and that he's accepted her wish. Francesca takes a deep breath, just relieved that she actually made it out of that conversation alive, and Lord Ark doesn't seem to mind the deal. He says those donuts were great and asks if she can do other flavors. Francesca asks if he's really into sweet things, using his full name Arquilarg, which makes him laugh a bit. He says it's been forever since a human called him that, so she can just call him Ark. Francesca agrees to the new nickname and says she'll go with Lord Ark from now on. She pulls out her laptop and starts showing him the variety, explaining how they have different types of dough and glazes, going through the list of fancy options like honey-soaked lemon and donuts with black tea leaves mixed in. The list just keeps going. She points out there are even chocolate-covered ones and all kinds of other varieties. Looking at the menu, she starts to worry since these new ones are way more expensive than the basic ones, but author girl pops up and tells her to forget about the cost, since that compensation money they got covers everything. Lord Ark notices Francesca using a magical void to pull out items, and he comments on her having infinite storage. He mentions that she can use some pretty advanced magic for a human, which catches her off guard. Francesca starts getting emotional, thinking about how this is the first time anyone has ever actually been impressed by her. But she gets back to business as the screen shows she successfully traded in her old accessories for 3.5 million points. She's shocked at how much her family's jewelry was worth, realizing she can basically order whatever she wants now, so she goes on a massive shopping spree. Lord Ark looks at the pile of stuff and says she really went all out with the orders, making Francesca a little nervous. She asks him if he thinks she might have overdone it just a bit, and she admits that all the stress from her past life and family grudges probably made her click buy a few too many times. Lord Ark doesn't care about the cost. He says that amount of food is nothing for a dragon and tells her to hurry up and open the boxes. Francesca starts serving him, explaining that this first batch has black tea leaves mixed right into the dough. Lord Ark takes a bite and notices the flavor is way different from the last one, pointing out that it has a floral scent, which makes sense since he's eating a black tea donut. He thinks food from another world has a really unique taste, while Francesca just watches him with a smile, and she decides to grab a honey lemon donut for herself to see how it tastes, taking a bite as she thinks about how the icing on the outside is so sweet. But that feeling doesn't last long because the sourness hits her hard. She realizes the honey-soaked lemons mixed into the dough really pack a punch, even though the way the icing melts in her mouth feels perfect, and she loves how refreshing the citrus flavor is, so the sweet and sour taste starts moving through her tired body. It feels like all the stress and exhaustion are just washing away, and she sighs while thinking about how she definitely won over the dragon's stomach with these snacks, but it looks like she's also trapped now because she won't be able to stop eating them herself, thinking these sweets from the other world are honestly dangerous with how addictive they are. Francesca holds out the box of donuts and tells Lord Ark he's gotta try this one too, hoping to share how awesome the honey lemon donut tastes with him, but Lord Ark is still busy working on the black tea pastry he already started on. He mentions he's looking forward to the lemon one next, and Francesca realizes he's eating the tea donut she wanted, and Lord Ark sees her reaction and mumbles a quick apology while he finishes his bite. Francesca quickly tells him it's fine since the food was supposed to be an offering for him anyway. She asks for forgiveness, thinking about how these donuts are literally the price for her life, so acting like an idiot about who eats what is a bad move. She bows down low and tells him she's truly sorry, and Lord Ark just gives a little grunt. He tells her that seeing her act so scared is kind of a letdown. He says to look up and that he accepts her apology, so she stands there with her hands together and says it's an honor to be in his good graces. Lord Ark tells Francesca to give him that honey lemon donut as well. He's ready for the next one. But he mentions that eating tiny sweets in his dragon body is actually pretty tough. Francesca looks at the small treats and realizes they really aren't a good fit for his massive hands and mouth, so she looks through her menu and asks if she should find him something a bit bigger to eat. She searches but can't find any large donuts that have the same shape. It's all just normal-sized stuff. Moving on, Francesca suggests a roll cake or even a whole chiffon cake instead, thinking the size might be better, while Lord Ark admits he's curious about the bigger sweets, but even those probably wouldn't match his giant size anyway. He decides that if that's the case, he'll just change things up, and Francesca watches as the air starts to shift. Lord Ark suddenly transforms into a human and says this form is way more fitting for eating. He casually takes a bite of a donut, and Francesca just stares with her eyes wide open. She recognizes the voice and asks if that's really him. Lord Ark looks at her and asks why she's making such a weird face. He jokes about her looking like a duck in a storm or a pigeon that just got hit by a pea shooter. Francesca admits she never expected Lord Ark could actually turn into a human. She blushes and apologizes for staring. But Lord Ark just explains that he tried his best to copy the humans he saw way back before he went to sleep. As he stuffs his face with donuts, Francesca notices his tail wagging and wonders if she's just seeing things or if it's real. It hits her that it wasn't a hallucination at all. She gets totally flustered seeing the dragon acting so happy. Lord Ark apologizes and says he still can't quite control the tail yet, but Francesca tells him it's fine since she wasn't hurt. He looks at the donut in his hand and mentions that even though he's never used this form before, it's not half bad. He finds the human body way better for small movements, like picking up and breaking apart these tiny treats. Francesca watches him eat and thinks he's lost all his dignity. He clearly just wanted to eat her snacks that badly. They sit together on some crates, while Lord Ark admits it's actually pretty amusing to be entertaining someone like this. Looking at him, Francesca just can't figure out how all that food is fitting inside a regular human stomach. Lord Ark looks completely satisfied after his meal, leaning back with a full stomach while Francesca watches him, silently hoping he doesn't end up with a stomachache. He just smiles while holding the last snack, and Francesca realizes she's still pretty shocked by his human form. She's trying her best to look calm on the outside, but inside she's still processing everything that's happened so far. She looks down at the mess he left behind. Looking at the empty packaging, she's impressed by how much he actually ate and wonders how to dispose of the paper box. Since there aren't any garbage dumps on the island, she figures the best way to handle the trash is to just burn it. She starts gathering all the empty boxes into a stack to carry them outside the temple. Lord Ark watches her and asks why she's even bothering to pick all that up. Francesca tells him she's going to burn them to tidy up the place. Lord Ark gives her a look and suggests that instead of going through all that trouble, she should just feed them to the salamander. Francesca's eyes sparkle with instant curiosity as she repeats the name, wondering exactly what kind of creature he's talking about. Francesca stops what she's doing and asks if the creature he's talking about is actually a spirit. She explains how she always heard they used to help humans out back in the day, but they were supposed to be extinct by now. Lord Ark looks at her like she's being weird and asks why she's so shocked, since it's not a rare thing to him. Francesca stays quiet. She's worried that finding out all the spirits vanished while he was asleep might actually make him depressed. She tries to say something to him, but Lord Ark just stares at a stone pillar and calls out for the salamander, giving a direct command for the little guy to stop hiding and show itself right now. A tiny lizard-like creature pops into view and yells out for its boss, the black dragon, and it looks right at him, asking what the big occasion is for calling it out all of a sudden. The author girl completely loses her mind in the background, screaming about how the thing just looks like a regular iguana. But Francesca is having a total fangirl moment, holding her face in her hands because she can't believe she's seeing a real spirit. Lord Ark hides a smile behind his hand, thinking to himself that while he first thought Francesca was just some stuck-up noble, she's actually pretty funny. Francesca starts panicking and blushing, apologizing for being so unladylike. She admits she really believed his kind had died out a long time ago. The little lizard isn't feeling that label at all and tells her that calling them extinct is a bit harsh, especially since he explains that while fewer people can see spirits now that humans rely on magic tools, they're definitely still around. Francesca listens closely and tells him she gets how things look from his perspective, but when she addresses him as Lord Salamander, the little guy starts waving his arms around, begging her to drop the formal title because it just makes him feel weird and antsy. He turns back to Lord Ark and asks his boss when he managed to land such a gorgeous wife, a comment that leaves Francesca completely floored. She stands there sweating, realizing that the whole wife thing is a topic Lord Ark definitely isn't ready to deal with yet. Lord Ark sets the record straight, explaining that she isn't his bride, she's just a flower sacrifice that was offered up to him. The salamander thinks that sounds like a pretty dark way to meet, but Lord Ark just looks at her and says she's turned out to be a really interesting girl. Francesca looks down politely and apologizes for the late intro, finally giving him her real name. The author girl giggles while Francesca just can't get over how cute the little lizard guy is, and she thinks it's awesome that the salamander is the one who's been keeping all the temple bonfires lit this whole time. The little guy doesn't miss a beat and brags that keeping those flames going is a total piece of cake. So the story goes that this whole ruined place was originally built as a spot to worship the underworld king, but it was basically left to rot and ended up in this state once Lord Ark moved into the territory. The salamander takes a sip of his drink, having lived in this spot ever since the temple was first built, which makes Francesca wonder why his flames are blue. She figured they'd be red since that's the color of his body. He holds up his fire and explains that while living things use red flames, the bloodless dead use blue ones. He finishes by saying that's just the way people have described it since the old days. Salamander explains that blue fire actually fits the temple better than red since it was built for the underworld king, and Francesca totally agrees with that logic. She gets curious though and asks him why he even bothered to keep all those bonfires lit after everyone had already left the place behind. So Salamander looks out at the ruins and says that even if the people stopped coming and the place fell apart, he still wanted to keep the fires going because he thinks even gods get lonely sometimes, and that's just a really sad thought to him. Francesca realizes that since he's lived right alongside humans for so many years, he's probably picked up on those kinds of feelings, which makes her joke to herself about it being a heated argument coming from a fire spirit, while Lord Ark just sips his tea in the back. Lord Ark takes a quiet moment to himself before mentioning that while the donuts were great, this tea has a crazy good smell too, and Francesca smiles, describing how the drink feels super elegant but still leaves her feeling really refreshed. To her, the whole thing smells like sweet nectar or fruit, giving off this rich vibe that makes it feel like flowers are blooming right in her mouth. But she's honestly shocked because she expected black tea to be bitter and dry, yet this cup tastes sweet even without any sugar added. Francesca asks why she was even called there, and Salamander realizes he totally forgot because they were having such a good time talking. She hands over an empty donut box, saying Lord Ark wanted him to have it. The little guy is actually impressed by how nice the paper feels. Looking at the stack, Salamander says that with this much stuff, he's not going to run out of magic power for a long time. Francesca watches in total shock as he literally starts vacuuming up the paper boxes into a swirl of energy, making Lord Ark comment on how it must be her first time seeing a spirit work. He explains that salamanders can turn anything that burns into raw magic. It finally clicks for Francesca why he summoned a fire spirit specifically, while the little guy lays back looking stuffed. Turns out, while spirits can get mana from nature, using matching items is way faster, and Terran pops in to explain that mana is just the fuel for magic, while magic quality is what defines the type of power someone has. Salamander is basically on cloud 9, saying it's been forever since he's talked to a human, and getting some magic makes today the best day ever. Seeing him so hyped makes Francesca smile, and she tells him she's just really glad he's happy. Francesca admits she feels kind of bad because it feels like she just made him clean up a bunch of trash, and she tells the little guy to just let her know if he wants anything else. Lord Ark's eye literally starts sparkling as he says he wants to eat some meat, which Francesca agrees to, saying she can definitely get some ordered for him. Salamander is totally shocked that she can even order stuff like that and calls her impressive, but being called Miss for the first time makes Francesca blush like crazy. Moving on, she opens up her menu to see what kind of meats are available. It turns out there's everything from beef and chicken to weird stuff like horse and ostrich. They even have frog meat and different cuts listed, plus processed stuff, making Francesca's head spin since there are way too many choices for her to pick from. Lord Ark is busy eating when Francesca starts wondering what kind of meat he'd actually prefer. He stops for a second like he's thinking it over, eventually admitting he wants to know the details but can't read the text on her screen, so he just asks what they have. Francesca looks over the list and tells him it's basically everything from regular livestock to game meat and poultry. It's a massive variety, and after hearing the options, Lord Ark decides he's in the mood for some beef. Francesca nods and starts listing off every specific cut available, from tenderloin and ribs to shank and neck. But while she's asking which one he wants, Lord Ark starts wondering if she even knows how to cook. The thought of it makes her internal self totally freak out. She realizes that even though she has all of Terran's memories and knows the theory behind making a meal, the reality is she's never actually tried cooking anything before, and the pressure is starting to get to her. Salamander notices her looking completely miserable and asks why she's making such a gloomy face, but then the little guy gets all excited and tells her he can help her out with the cooking part. Francesca looks at Salamander like he's a total hero. She's so relieved to have help that she calls him her savior and thinks he's awesome for stepping up. She's actually pretty surprised by the whole thing, admitting she had no idea salamanders could even handle a kitchen. The little spirit explains that before everyone started using magic tools, the fireplace was their whole world, so teaching her to cook is no problem at all. Lord Ark is just chilling in the back with some snacks, mentioning how it's actually really reassuring to have an expert on board. Francesca starts calling him teacher and says she's in his care. The little guy starts feeling himself, thinking about how he's finally moving up in the world. They decide to just order some pre-cooked meat for the time being, and Francesca figures she can just polish her skills bit by bit as they go along. Salamander tells her not to worry at all because with his help, she'll be whipping up some seriously good food in no time. Lord Ark flashes a smile and says he's looking forward to the day he can eat her cooking, which immediately makes Francesca lose her cool and start panicking again. She starts overthinking it, wondering if his human stomach can even handle raw meat like his dragon form probably could. And the author girl pops up out of nowhere to mention meat sashimi, which has Francesca completely losing it. The author girl mentions that meat sashimi is a thing where she's from, even adding that the organs are actually pretty good. This leaves Francesca internally screaming, wondering what the food is even like in Terran's old world. Suddenly, Francesca gets this really intense look on her face. She's blushing and admits she is actually incredibly curious about it. Lord Ark just stares at her for a moment with a suspicious look on his face. He finally breaks the silence and asks her what exactly she's plotting now. Francesca just gives him a sweet smile and says that scheming is such an ugly word to use. She claims she just thinks it's important to enjoy a good meal, but she eventually gives in and admits she just can't resist her own curiosity. She reaches out and taps the yes button on her magic screen, and right then she decides that even if she can't handle the food herself, Lord Ark definitely can. A massive stack of delivery boxes suddenly slams down onto the floor, filling up the space. Salamander's eyes light up when he sees the shipment. He gets all excited and tells her she's brought him some more of that high-quality paper. The little spirit asks if he can have the new paper too, and Francesca tells him he's welcome to it. Meanwhile, Lord Ark just stands in the back looking totally exhausted by her shopping habits. She holds up one of the sleek black boxes and tells them she just needs to take the contents out first, asking them to give her a moment. It turns out she ordered a bunch of high-end Kuroge Wagyu roast beef. She's got everything from the round to the sirloin ready to go. Lord Ark peeks over her shoulder looking pretty confused. Asking what she's even holding, Francesca explains it's aged roast beef. Specifically a set that comes with both round and sirloin cuts. Lord Ark repeats the words back like he's never heard of aging meat before. So she tells him it's a process where they keep it right at the freezing point. She adds that it's actually better if it sits out for a while, so they should probably save that one for later. Moving on, she mentions how many different beef brands exist in that other world, which is why she ordered a tasting set. Lord Ark just stands there thinking. He always thought a cow was just a cow, but apparently there's more to it. Francesca looks over the paperwork and notes that the way these animals are raised and fed is totally different. She hands a sheet to Salamander, commenting on how much paperwork like instructions and certificates comes with otherworld meat. Then she pulls out a Carpaccio set with a huge smile, telling them this is the kind of meat you can eat totally raw. Lord Ark just stares at her, wondering to himself if eating raw meat is actually supposed to be a big deal. Francesca mentions she's never eaten raw meat before and says the stuff from her world would just make her sick, but she's impressed by the meat in front of her. The pink color and white fat look totally amazing together. The author girl jumps in to explain that look is called marbling, so Francesca grabs a pair of tongs and says she's going to start plating the food immediately. While Salamander checks out the manuals, Francesca mentions the tongs are a bit tricky and the grinder is stiff. She looks at the final plate and realizes it doesn't look much like the example photo, but at least she thinks she did a decent job of getting the cheese spread around. Francesca asks Lord Ark if it's okay for a first try. He says it's fine since the taste is all that matters. Next, she has to slice the roast beef and starts getting nervous about whether she can do it right. The author girl coaches her to just pull the blade smoothly instead of sawing at it, and Francesca agrees to try. Francesca focuses everything on the knife, telling herself to just place the blade and pull it back smoothly. She makes her move, and the sudden action has Lord Ark and the others completely frozen in shock. Wiping the sweat off her face, Francesca lets out a breath and asks if she actually did it right, so Lord Ark looks at the result and tells her the cut is actually perfect. He's surprised she got the hang of it so fast and says those last few slices of meat look beautiful. Francesca looks over the plate, noticing the first few bits are messy, but her technique definitely improved, making the whole thing look good enough to eat. She tells Lord Ark there are plenty of condiments like salt and olive oil to use. Since it's her first time ever trying raw meat, she decides to start things off with the Carpaccio. Lord Ark mentions it's his first time eating cooked meat too, and Francesca realizes they're both having a brand new experience together. She's totally hyped to finally try it, picking up a piece and getting ready for that first big bite. Francesca and Lord Ark both take a bite at the same time and just freeze. The flavor hits them so hard they can't even move for a second. Francesca says it's delicious as they both stand there surrounded by happy vibes, and Lord Ark agrees that it's seriously good stuff. The meat is incredibly smooth and soft on the tongue, and even though it's sliced thin, it's still got that perfect springy texture and a deep, rich flavor. Francesca closes her eyes and enjoys the perfect balance of the cheese, thinking about how the mix of sweet and salty is just right and tastes so milky. The more she chews, the more those rich meat flavors come out and mingle with the cheese until the whole thing just melts away. So Lord Ark looks completely impressed, saying it's wild how humans can change raw meat into something like this, and that their curiosity is almost scary. Francesca just smiles, thinking that if people put all their effort into researching food like this, the world would be a way more peaceful place. She moves on to the roast beef, noticing it's got this perfect dark caramel sear all along the outside, and when she looks closer, the way the colors fade from peach to rose on the inside looks absolutely beautiful. She takes another big bite, thinking the unique way it's prepared is exactly what makes it so good. Francesca is totally loving the food, gushing about how it's so tender it basically melts with every single bite. She's looking super happy and just keeps saying how delicious it is. She closes her eyes to really enjoy the way the sweet fat mixes with the savory outside of the meat. There's even this nutty flavor that starts spreading through her mouth, and it's honestly wild to her because she's already feeling full and satisfied, and she's only tried the very first type of meat they have. Lord Ark notices her pausing and asks if she's done eating already, because if she is, he's definitely going to finish it for her. Francesca totally freaks out and yells that she's definitely still eating, holding onto her plate so he doesn't swipe it. She tells him to quit snatching the food she picked out for herself, but Lord Ark just points out that she literally just said she was satisfied. She tells him he's already got the sirloin roast beef right there, while Salamander just watches them and laughs about how well they get along. It basically turns into a competition to see who can serve and eat the most, and Lord Ark isn't backing down, saying he can still eat way more. Francesca looks at him and realizes that despite all the chaos, things just feel right. The two of them just sit there together, and she can't help but think about how much fun she's actually having. Lord Ark suddenly thinks of something and asks Francesca if her skill can handle ordering a massive whole piece of meat. Francesca gets caught off guard by the request, but tells him she'll check and see if that's even an option. Lord Ark gets this intense, hungry look, saying he's dying to sink his teeth into something huge for once. So Francesca just nods and agrees. She starts getting worried that she might have accidentally triggered some of his wilder dragon instincts by bringing it up, so she hops on her laptop to look for what he wants, and the author girl suggests a dressed carcass is probably their best bet. Turns out they actually have it listed for millions of points, which is a pretty huge surprise, but Francesca points out that the skin and organs are already removed and asks him if he's still down to eat it. Lord Ark looks pretty annoyed about it, complaining that the organs are actually the most delicious part of the meal, but he decides it can't be helped and just shifts into his dragon form to start tearing into the meat anyway. Watching him eat a whole cow like that makes Francesca wonder if he was secretly hoping the thing would still be alive. Lord Ark starts ripping into the massive pile of meat, and Francesca can't help but think how gross it looks. But she knows this was the right call, even if it cost most of her points, because it's better than him eating her. Lord Ark says he's going for it while the author girl cheers him on from the sidelines like a fan. He admits he's never seen meat served up quite like this before, but he's still pretty impressed by the size, even though he complains it looks small without the head and legs, which makes Francesca ask if he's being serious. Salamander points out that it's all about perspective, since what looks like a mountain of food to her is just a single bite for a dragon in his true form. It really hits home for her just how dangerous he is, and staring at his giant fangs makes her realize he could swallow her whole without even trying. She notices that even one of his teeth is way bigger than her entire hand, which is honestly terrifying, but Lord Ark doesn't seem impressed at all, chewing on the massive snack and complaining that it tastes totally bland. Lord Ark looks pretty let down while he eats. He complains that once you've had cooked food, plain meat just doesn't cut it. He asks if that's really how it is, and Francesca smiles while admitting she honestly thought she was about to be eaten. She tells him not to worry though, because she can always just have more food delivered for him whenever he wants, which makes Lord Ark realize that as long as she's around, he'll never go hungry again. Francesca agrees, and even Salamander is relieved. But then Francesca suddenly stops and looks up. She senses a very familiar mana signature nearby that catches her off guard. She spots a bird circling above and realizes she was right that mana definitely belongs to her grandfather. The bird flies down and drops a sealed letter right into her hands as she reaches out to catch it. Lord Ark asks what that was all about while Salamander freaks out asking if she's okay, but she's just standing there looking happy. She tells them she's sorry for making them worry but promises she's doing perfectly fine, explaining that the delivery is actually a letter from her family, specifically a message from her grandfather back home. Grandfather looks completely done with the situation. He points out that instead of scolding the younger sister for cheating, Imar is just blaming his innocent older daughter and turning her into a scapegoat for the whole mess. But Imar doesn't even look ashamed. He asks what his father is even talking about, saying it would have been fine if Francesca had just kept a tighter grip on the prince's heart, so it's obviously just her fault for being useless. That's the final straw for the grandfather, who grips his cane and calls Imar a total bastard, demanding to know how he can talk that way about the daughter who basically ran the whole estate and handled all their business. Imar just leans back in his chair, acting like he doesn't get why the old man is even getting so angry since he thinks they basically took in a useless freeloader who should be working herself to the bone for the house. Grandfather can barely look at him. He just sighs and says he never realized his own son's character was actually this rotten. Imar looks offended, asking if that's really how a father should talk to his son before claiming Francesca was the one who broke his beloved daughter's heart. Imar grits his teeth, thinking everything would have been simple if Francesca had just died quietly as a sacrifice, but grandfather reminds him she's still his flesh and blood. Imar just spits back that she deserves this for stealing her sister's man, and he shouts that Elijah is his only real daughter while he's never even considered that useless girl part of his family. Grandfather's eyes turn cold as he points out that Imar dumped every responsibility on Francesca and her late mother, then asks who the real failure is. Imar snaps and lunges forward, grabbing the old man by the collar in a total rage. Grandfather doesn't even flinch. He just tells Imar he always knew he lacked the guts and brains to actually lead this house. He brings up the past, mentioning how an epidemic killed the oldest son and the second son was already gone, leaving Imar as the only option left. Grandfather recalls how he had to beg Lady Elisaveta to marry down and save them, since she was a highly trained duchess who was originally meant for the older brother. Imar stammers that he's the boss now, but grandfather shuts him down, asking if he's ever actually done anything besides hate his wife and daughter while dumping his work on them. Grandfather stands by the window, thinking how he really hoped Francesca would change her mind eventually. But it's crazy to think she actually believed a guy like Amar would love her just because he's her dad. He looks at her memory, feeling like she's just a pitiful girl. Amar is sweating, completely stunned by the conversation. He asks his father what on earth he's even trying to say with all this. Grandfather turns his back, telling Amar that if that's the case, he has his own ways of handling things. He knows he has to be smart about his next move. He suddenly grabs Amar by the collar, staring him down and warning him not to think anything is going to go the way he planned. Back in her room, Francesca wakes up and realizes she must have crashed right after reading the letter. She probably just pulled out her bedding and passed out. She sits there looking at the wall, thinking about how much of a hassle this whole situation is becoming. Francesca thinks back to the letter her grandfather wrote, remembering how it felt like he just let his emotions take over while writing it. He wrote about how she never gave up on her father and gave her a real apology for all the pain she had to go through, showing that even if things turned deadly, he'd come to bring her home because no matter what, he truly loved her. Salamander pops his head up first thing in the morning, loudly asking Francesca if she's finally awake yet, and she greets him from her bed, though she mentions it's not exactly polite for a gentleman to visit a lady's bedroom like this. Salamander just shrugs it off and says he's bad, but he's more worried about why everyone looks so miserable. He asks what's up and notes that she's been acting super gloomy ever since she finished reading that letter from her family, so Francesca sighs and admits that her grandfather seems pretty furious about everything. She knows this is going to be a huge problem for her plans, especially since she was actually starting to look forward to her new life here even more than she expected. While she pets Salamander, she realizes that she can't just ignore it. She definitely needs to send a reply back to her grandfather as soon as possible. She starts getting ready, thinking that she'll just tell them the truth, even though she's pretty sure they won't understand her side of things at all. As she heads to her desk, she decides she needs to be very clear about having no intention of ever dealing with her family again. She thinks it's best if they just consider her dead from now on, because she's fully planning on living a happy life on this island. She grabs her quill and gets to work, making sure to write down every single detail, including one final request. She wants them to visit her mother's grave and let her know that her daughter is actually safe and doing just fine. Francesca finally finishes writing her response to her family. She looks at the envelope and says it's finally done. So she stands there with Salamander, figuring that the next step is just finding a way to send the letter out. While looking around, she realizes she crashed there last night without saying anything to anyone. She starts looking at the room, wondering which part of the temple she's actually in since Salamander mentions how tons of people in formal outfits used to come and go all the time back in the day. Francesca thinks about that and asks if he's talking about shrine maidens and priests. Then she figures if that's true, she's probably stuck in the deepest part of the temple. She starts walking through the halls because she really wants to find a spot as close to the entrance as possible to send her mail. As she explores, she stops in her tracks after seeing a huge statue of a god. She's pretty surprised to find something like that just sitting there, and she looks at the base of the statue, wondering if people used to leave animal sacrifices on it a long time ago. She looks down at the tea she brought, thinking about how weird it is that no one is left to pray here anymore. She wonders what happens to a god when everyone forgets them, but she decides that as long as she's living here, she can at least show some respect. Francesca and Salamander take a second to offer a prayer at the foot of the giant statue. The whole place feels quiet and heavy with history as they finish up. Salamander speaks up and thanks her for showing respect to the old god, which catches her a bit off guard. She just smiles and says it wasn't a big deal. Since she's staying there now, she figures it's only right to say hello properly. Salamander lets out a little laugh and says he's positive the god is happy about it too. They start heading back, and Salamander starts wondering if the Master Black Dragon is finally awake. He mentions that by this time, the boss should usually be up, though he warns her that the guy is a total bear to deal with in the morning. Francesca gets a little nervous and says he's definitely intimidating to be around, but Salamander tells her not to worry. The boss would never actually let her get hurt. When they finally see him, Francesca gives a polite bow and asks Lord Ark if he had a good night's rest. Lord Ark tells her to drop the formal stuff and calls her loon. He admits he slept great because his stomach was full from her cooking, so he's actually in a good enough mood to praise her. Francesca just nods and says she gets it, while Salamander thinks to himself how much the master hates it when people he likes act all stiff and formal. Francesca pulls out her menu and asks Lord Ark what he's in the mood to eat today. She looks over the options, wondering if maybe something savory would be better than more sweets, as Lord Ark says he's cool with the meat from yesterday or those donuts, but Salamander really wants the dried fish. The group starts talking over each other until Francesca realizes they aren't making any progress at all, so everyone puts their heads together to finally settle on a meal. Author Girl watches them, thinking it's pretty interesting to see Francesca like this since she used to be a loner. Lord Ark gets tired of the back and forth and tells Francesca to just order whatever she wants. She agrees and says she'll pick out something light to start the morning off right, which makes author girl notice that Salamander looks totally bored with how long this is taking. Francesca explains that she wants to avoid oily food since he just woke up, and she's definitely not ready for fish yet. Fran admits that Lord Ark has a point, so she starts thinking about what food she can actually make right now as she starts picking out different items one by one. Deciding to just keep adding more to the pile, Lord Ark leans over her shoulder, curious to see what she actually bought this time since Fran shows off a pork loin ham and cheese tasting set, plus some fresh bread and cold brew tea, which gets her even more excited to show off the new tableware and kitchen knives she ordered as well. She grabs the ham and says she's starting with the slicing. She's still thinking about that roast beef and wants a win. Author girl is totally into it, cheering her on and saying that every big journey starts with one single step. Fran looks over at Salamander and realizes she's going to need a little help with the next part, so she explains that she wants to toast the ham and bread and asks if there's a good way to make that happen. The group looks over at a stone grill in the back, wondering if that might be the best spot to get the cooking done. Fran takes a look at the stone grill but feels a bit weird about using it. She says it's meant for the gods and feels guilty using something that's sacred just for their dinner. Lord Ark decides to pivot and suggests they go with a classic campfire vibe instead. And right on cue, Salamander starts getting the fire ready to spin around in these crazy patterns. Author girl thinks the magic looks totally beautiful, while Fran is just standing there stunned since she's never seen a spirit do anything like this. Salamander gives a little wink and explains that he can handle all the heat adjustments himself, so Fran shouldn't have anything to worry about while she's trying to cook. But he immediately cranks the flames up way too high. Fran starts losing it and yells that the fire is getting way too hot. She manages to get her focus back and gets herself all hyped up, announcing that it's finally time to get moving on their very first dish. Lord Ark just gives her this look and says he honestly just hopes the final result is actually edible, which catches Fran off guard and makes her rethink everything. The ham and bread are sliced up and ready to go, but she's starting to realize that being enthusiastic during the prep was the easy part. She starts remembering all these warnings from Taryn's memories about how cooking leads to fires and explosions, and suddenly she's shaking while holding her skewer because she's convinced the fire is going to get her. She starts doing this frantic little dance to stay away from the heat, leaving Lord Ark and Salamander just staring at her wondering what she's even doing. Fran keeps jumping back because the heat is making her skin tingle, and she starts asking if things are getting a little too dangerous around the fire. Salamander just looks at her and says he gets it. Since it's her first time, she's probably just scared of getting burned or maybe even ruining the food. Fran ducks away from the bright light and asks if there's any chance the whole thing might just explode, but then she tries to pull herself together. She tells herself there's no reason to worry as long as she's got her friends right there to help her, and she realizes that having a literal fire spirit around actually makes this the safest campfire she could ever work with. Salamander asks Lord Ark how much longer he plans on laughing at her, while Fran tells the dragon she's going to make him eat his words. Salamander has to step in and tell her to slow down, warning her that she needs to flip the food or it's going to burn right off the stick. Fran sees the meat sizzling and panics, realizing she almost waited too long to move it. So she watches it closely and notes that it's grilling way faster than she thought it would. She figures it's fine though since the ham was edible raw to begin with. She takes a good look at the skewer, just wondering if she's finally done enough to call it a meal. Fran explains the next step is to get the bread onto a skewer and toast it until it's a perfect golden brown, keeping her eyes on the fire while Lord Ark leans back looking bored, asking if the food is finally done yet. Fran turns to him and asks for his help, which makes him complain about how she's treating a dragon like a luggage carrier these days. He's definitely moving up in her world, but Fran is too locked into care, thinking about how melting the cheese is a total race against time. Author girl is in the background losing it, cheering her on to slap that cheese down like some old guy from the Alps. Fran gets a bit flustered and tells Lord Ark she just wants him to eat it while it's fresh, and he admits that when she puts it like that, he doesn't really mind helping. She shouts that she's ready to start, focusing everything on the flames as the cheese begins to bubble and melt under the heat. Lord Ark stands ready with his plate, looking a little grumpy about the wait while the cheese reaches the perfect point of melting. Fran yells for him to get ready, and he just gives a serious nod, prepared for whatever comes next. The cheese bread looks absolutely incredible, and author girl is in the corner completely losing it because Lord Ark finally takes a massive bite, and the cheese stretches out so far it actually catches him off guard. He's totally blown away, yelling about how he could eat this forever and that her skills are insane for a beginner, which makes Francesca smile, telling him she's just really glad he's enjoying the meal. But then Lord Ark stops mid-chew to warn her that if she doesn't keep her hands moving, the rest of the bread is gonna burn. Francesca panics instantly, realizing she forgot to flip the bread again while they were talking. She looks down at the toast and admits it's not really golden anymore, it's more like the dark brown of a raccoon dog. She tells herself she can't let her guard down yet and needs to focus because the cheese is the most important part, but the smell is so good she just has to stop for a second to take it all in. She remembers how strong the fermentation smell was when she first cut the cheese, but now that it's over the fire. Francesca notices the nutty smell of the cheese getting stronger. It's seriously making her hungry, and that sweet, milky scent from the grill is just too much to handle. She watches the cheese melt, and honestly the wait is making her more excited for the first bite. She starts daydreaming about opening a shop where they scrape melted cheese over food right in front of people. She's pretty sure a place like that would be a huge hit. But she snaps back to reality when the food is finally done. It looks perfect, so she stares at the bread and realizes she's going to have to use her bare hands. She gets a little flustered, thinking that maybe it's a bit unrefined for her to just grab it and eat. But then Salamander asks what's wrong and tells her she better hurry up and eat before the cheese gets hard. That's all the convincing she needs. She agrees that this kind of treat has to be eaten while it's still hot. She tells Salamander that he always knows how to boost her confidence, and with that, she's ready to dig in. She takes a massive bite of the cheesy bread. It's so good her eyes literally start sparkling. Lord Ark asks Fran how the food is. Wondering if she can feel the massive impact of his cooking, Fran just nods along while she realizes the outside of the bread is perfectly crisp, while the inside stays chewy and soft on her tongue. It feels like the hot, milky cheese and the bread are literally dancing together, creating this super rich flavor that makes them seem like the perfect pair, almost like they were always meant to be one single thing. Even the way the bread is sliced unevenly helps out, adding a really cool contrast to every single bite. She looks at the flame-grilled roast ham and thinks she could eat this stuff forever, so she decides to dive back in. The taste hits her so hard she looks completely stunned. She can't help but yell out that this is real meat. Lord Ark looks a little confused and points out that ham is always made of meat, but Fran insists she knows that. It's just that the texture is so good the more she chews, the more all those juices just keep coming out. Lord Ark agrees it's delicious, enjoying the meal since you can really feel the quality of the meat in every bite. Fran realizes that eating nothing but cheese, bread, and ham is starting to make her mouth feel pretty heavy, so she takes a sip of a floral drink. The sweet scent and slight bitterness completely clear her palate and make her feel refreshed, making her glad they have this festival drink to balance things out. Lord Ark asks if there's any more meat and bread left, so Fran offers to grill up another batch for him since he's still hungry and wants more, which makes her happy to see him enjoying the food so much. The author girl shows up with a frying pan as Fran starts thinking that skewering everything is becoming a total pain. That's when the author girl loses it and screams that cheese bread is all about the romance of the skewer. Fran starts using the pan and finds it way easier, wishing she'd known this sooner while the author girl just talks about romance. Suddenly Lord Ark grabs her hand. He asks what she thinks she's doing because her skin is turning bright red from the heat. Even the little salamander gets worried, but Fran just feels bad that her past life memories didn't help her cook any better. Salamander tries to cheer Francesca up by saying everyone struggles their first time, while Lord Ark adds that she actually did a good job. He thinks her brain and body are just out of sync, and she needs time to adjust. Francesca starts tearing up from the support, telling the two of them that they're being way too kind, but then she totally loses it, crying that their sympathy is just making her feel even more pathetic right now. Moving on, Francesca realizes she has a fresh headache to deal with. She's got a massive pile of empty glass bottles. The author girl suggests recycling them into mosaic tiles or flower pots, since she has some old memories of doing that. But Francesca realizes she can't even get the cement she needs because her powers only let her order food. As she sits there stuck, the little salamander pops over and asks if she's having a hard time getting rid of the trash. She sighs and tells him the glass is just going to keep piling up, and she has no clue what to do about it. Salamander mentions that some old man he knows loves this kind of stuff, and asks if he should call him over, leaving Francesca confused about who he's talking about. Lord Ark looks pretty annoyed as he mutters that he knows the guy. He's just way too talkative for his taste, which makes Francesca realize he's not exactly thrilled about the plan. She asks if he has some kind of messy history with this person. While Lord Ark sulks, Salamander starts shouting for the old man at the top of his lungs, leaving Francesca completely confused. Just then she notices magic starting to swirl around. She's shocked because someone is being summoned without a circle. A voice grumbles from the middle of the light, complaining about all the noise and asking what's going on. It turns out to be a boy with a monocle, who tells Salamander he should be more considerate of the neighbors. But seeing a kid show up totally fries Francesca's brain. She can't tell if he's a dwarf or if she's just seeing things. The boy looks up at the throne and mentions how surprised he is by the view. He says he was wondering why Salamander called, but he never expected to see the black dragon actually awake and alert. Lord Ark just scoffs, telling the newcomer he looks like he's been taking it pretty easy himself, finally calling him Gnome. Francesca finally realizes the boy with the monocle is actually Lord Gnome, which means he's definitely the Earth Spirit Gnome doesn't waste any time, telling Lord Ark he's still as talkative as ever before asking if he's finally fixed that oversleeping habit of his. He keeps lecturing him about acting more like a dignified ancient dragon, making Lord Ark snap that this nagging is exactly why he hates calling for the spirit. Francesca thinks the guy really acts like a retired old lady, but then Gnome notices her standing there and he looks her up and down, simply asking the young girl if she's a human. Francesca gets super polite, apologizing and saying it's a total pleasure to meet him, introducing herself and mentioning she's under the dragon's care. Gnome looks a little awkward and tells her not to be so formal, since all that politeness is actually making him feel nervous too. Salamander jumps in to greet the old man and says he has something important to ask him, but Gnome is just confused by the sudden request. He starts scolding Salamander, saying he's told him 1,000,000 times that he needs to stop rushing ahead without a plan. Salamander just tells him to stop nagging and save the boring preaching for later, since they've got actual stuff to deal with right now. Lord Gnome sighs that those two are really something else, but Salamander just ignores the attitude and yells for the old man to check out the bottle he's sitting on. The spirit moves in for a closer look and immediately starts losing it, his eyes going wide as he repeats how impressive it is. He can't believe his eyes, shouting that this is some incredibly high-level glasswork right in front of him. Gnome starts geeking out over the smooth surface and how there isn't a single bump, amazed by how clear the color is. He calls it beautiful and tells Francesca she needs to see this too, thinking back to the days when glass was always cloudy and distorted. Francesca tries to get a word in as he keeps going, but he's on a roll, shouting about how crazy it is that humans can now mass-produce identical shapes with this much precision. Author Girl just laughs, saying the guy is acting like a total nerd over his hobby. Francesca notices the look on his face and realizes that Lord Gnome really has a soft spot for things made by human hands, though Author Girl is quick to point out that these were actually just made by a machine in a factory. Francesca smiles and thinks that since humans are the ones who built the machines, the glass counts as being handmade in a way. Gnome finally calms down for a second and asks the young lady if she was the one who brought these bottles into the dragon's lair. Francesca stammers a bit, explaining that she didn't exactly bring the bottles with her, but used her skill to order them. Gnome's monocle glints as he hears the words online shopping and immediately demands to know every single detail about how it works. The conversation takes a serious turn as Gnome looks down, mentioning how tragic it is that human sacrifice rituals still exist. He hugs the glass bottle, admitting he has mixed feelings since that dark ritual is the only reason he got to see such amazing craft. Looking at the girl, he genuinely tells Francesca that regardless of the bottles, he's just glad she's alive. She agrees and says she feels that deep down, knowing she was probably just lucky to survive. Francesca thinks about the girls who came before her, knowing they were all killed by goblins and monsters long before meeting the dragon. Lord Ark speaks up, telling them there's no use dwelling on the past since those souls are likely moving on to be reborn anyway. Gnome agrees and suggests they just pray for those souls to be at peace, ending the heavy moment. Moving on, Salamander breaks the silence by calling out to the old man and asking if he can take all the empty bottles back with him. Gnome is absolutely losing it over the bottle, saying that glasswork this high quality doesn't even exist in this world, yet Lord Ark looks at him pretty skeptically, pointing out that gnomes usually obsess over gold and that Gnome is a total weirdo for this, but Gnome just shrugs it off, saying that metals and sand are all just minerals anyway, so it's all the same to him. He stares at the glass with pure wonder, thinking to himself that living for hundreds of years was worth it just to see something this cool. Francesca watches him, feeling glad she brought them since she figured the elder would know what to do with the leftovers. Gnome is so hyped that he grabs all the empty bottles at once, shouting that he's keeping every single one of them. Suddenly he stops and looks at Francesca, asking the young lady if she happens to have anything else in a different shape. Gnome stares at her with massive stars in his eyes, totally begging to see more variety in the glasswork. Francesca gets a bit flustered and tells him that's all for now, but since they're low on drinks, she could probably order some more stuff, hoping to get everyone involved. She turns and asks Lord Ark if he wants to check out the catalog with them. Everyone is completely glued to the screen. Their eyes are wide with curiosity as they huddle around the tablet together. Lord Ark mentions that she's finally checking out the catalog, while Gnome stares at the screen and asks if this is some kind of skill. He starts browsing through the items, wondering if a rare-shaped container would be better as he points out a fish-shaped bottle. He notices another one shaped like an animal, remarking on how alcohol always seems to come in the coolest packaging. Gnome is totally impressed, saying that technology from another world is on a whole different level. Francesca agrees that their mechanical tech is pretty advanced, even though she hasn't actually seen it for herself yet. Gnome goes quiet for a second, looking a bit more serious as he says that while this is all very interesting, something is bothering him. He looks straight at Francesca and tells her that he's specifically talking about her. Francesca starts shaking and panics, asking if she did something rude without knowing it, but Gnome tells her it's not that at all. He calls it an old woman's intuition and says it looks like she was actually tricked into coming here. Gnome asks Francesca if there's actually anything she wants to do for herself now, which gets her thinking pretty hard about her future. Gnome mentions he was curious about that too. She's got really useful skills, but he tells her she doesn't need to stick around just for their sake. Francesca looks down and starts considering her options, eventually saying it might be fun to try growing something. Gnome asks if she means gardening, and she gets excited about the idea of making a whole garden. She starts remembering her past life as Terran, thinking about how her mom used to grow eggplants and tomatoes. She even remembers getting yelled at for snacking on the garden veggies before dinner. She smiles, saying a home garden is exactly what she has in mind. Gnome's eyes light up, and he says it's the perfect time for an earth spirit like him to shine. He tells them to leave the soil to him since Gnome gets a big idea and says he should probably call Undine and Sylph over too, since it would be way more fun with everyone together. Francesca completely loses it and repeats the names, asking if those aren't actually the 4 great fairies he's talking about. Salamander isn't feeling it at all and yells at Gnome for wanting to bring that brat along, but Gnome tells him to relax, explaining that a garden needs both water and wind to actually grow properly. Lord Ark watches them bicker and tells Francesca that once the spirits start acting like this, there's no way to shut them up. Gnome starts shouting about having a flower viewing party while Lord Ark just sighs, mentioned how powerful these spirits really are. Gnome pulls out a fish-shaped bottle looking pretty hyped. He mentions that calling Sylph requires a nice breeze, while Undine needs totally pure water. He knows the rules, but he asks Francesca if she's got any ideas on how to make it happen. Francesca looks at her tablet while Lord Ark stands nearby, and she mentions that while she knows how to handle the water, she isn't sure if calling the wind is even possible. But even without any real proof, she thinks she might have a way to make it work. Setting things in motion, she asks the spirits to start by trying out some of this water. She shows off an assortment of fancy bottled waters from all over her world, looking pretty excited, and Gnome is immediately obsessed with the glass quality, yelling about how amazing her world's tech is. His affection for her even goes up because of it, so Francesca just smiles and says she's glad he likes the bottles too. Salamander isn't as impressed and grumbles that he didn't even need water, which makes Francesca wonder if fire and water spirits just have a natural beef. But Salamander admits that it's wild how basically anything can come out of that wooden board of hers. She looks down at the tablet and thinks about how convenient it would be if she really could pull anything out, wondering if she'll get more categories as her skill level goes up, especially since she wants to try doing some DIY projects later on. Lord Ark looks a bit confused and asks what DIY even stands for, so Francesca explains that she thinks that's just what they call it, but Lord Ark just gives her this smug look and says she doesn't seem nearly handy enough to actually pull something like that off. Francesca totally loses it and starts yelling that she was talking about doing it eventually, not right this second. She gets a bit down on herself then, admitting she knows she's not as good with her hands as she'd like to believe, but she suddenly spots something on her screen and realizes she found it, even though she figured it wouldn't show up since it isn't food. Lord Ark leans over to get a look and asks what that round thing is, while Gnome and Salamander crowd around to see too. Gnome gets a huge grin on his face and starts laughing, saying this is the exact item he's been looking for, and Francesca throws her arms out wide to announce that they're looking at actual canned air. She starts going through the options, showing off one that's freezing mountain air and another that's supposed to be a breeze from cherry blossoms. She even finds one that's super specific, explaining that this last can is a special version from right when the entire era changed. Lord Ark looks at the can and asks if she's seriously saying there's actual air trapped inside that metal, and Francesca tells him that's exactly right, explaining she's just happy she could even order a novelty item like this. But Lord Ark isn't impressed and says air won't fill a stomach, so he has zero interest in anything that isn't food. The author girl totally agrees since she just wants to eat, but Francesca thinks canned flower scents are actually pretty romantic. Gnome holds up the bottles looking really impressed that she managed to gather both water and wind, and he mentions that he's sure the other guys would find all of this pretty entertaining to see. Francesca says she'd be honored if that were the case, but she's still feeling pretty anxious about whether they'll actually show up. So Lord Ark looks her right in the eye and asks why she doesn't just try making a spiritarium instead. Francesca stands there looking totally lost while trying to process the weird word. Lord Ark sees her confusion but just repeats the idea, asking her again why she doesn't just go ahead and make one. Gnome mentions how Lord Ark really went back into the history books for this idea, but Salamander thinks it's great since it's a garden that uses all the element spirits like them love, and Francesca just looks at them, admitting she never even knew something like that was a thing. So Gnome breaks it down for her, explaining that the whole thing is based on the 4 main elements of earth, fire, water, and wind. Francesca thinks the whole project sounds like it could be a lot of fun, and she even realizes it would probably look pretty good as home decor. The wheels in her head start turning as she thinks about everything she's going to need to build one. She looks over some containers and realizes she'll definitely need a solid box for the base and a good vessel to hold all those elements together. Because if she's going to put in the effort, she wants the final result to look clean and actually be beautiful. She starts mapping it out in her head, thinking she can pile up the soil on one side to make a little hill and put a glass for the water on the other. But Lord Ark tells her to stop stressing over the details and just start building it, since getting some practice in is the only way to get it right. Francesca's face lights up as she agrees that he's totally right, feeling ready to finally get started on the project. Francesca shows off the supplies she just got, telling everyone she's already ordered everything they're going to need. She kneels down to get to work and mentions she'll start things off by putting in the soil, but as she reaches out and starts digging into the dirt with her bare hands, Lord Ark and the spirits look on in total shock. Lord Ark quickly reaches out and tells her to wait, stopping her right in her tracks. He grabs her hands to pull them away from the dirt, leaving Francesca a bit confused as she asks him what's up. He looks at her and asks where she'd ever find a woman who digs through soil with her bare hands like that. Francesca starts blushing and immediately apologizes for showing him such an embarrassing side of herself. Lord Ark holds up her hands and points out that they're way too tiny to even scoop up a decent amount of dirt. So Francesca explains that when she was looking for tools to order, the only things she could find were dining forks and spoons. And while she feels like using silverware to dig isn't very ladylike, she's willing to do whatever it takes to finish her first project. Francesca crouches down to work on the soil. Surprised that it's not as tough as she expected, turns out she can scoop it all up with a serving spoon without needing any real muscle. Gnome watches her work and mentions that for a first-timer, she's actually putting everything together pretty skillfully, which makes Francesca really happy to hear. She looks at the spiritarium and says that ideally, she'd love to add some more color to the project by putting in some flowers or maybe even moss balls later on. Gnome gives her a bit of a reality check, saying moss might work out fine in this spot, but keeping flowers alive is going to be a completely different story. He cheers her up though, explaining that a spiritarium isn't actually finished the moment you build it, because it's the kind of thing that keeps growing. He tells her she can just keep adding to it whenever she wants, like swapping out the flowers for every season or just totally changing the layout when she feels like it. That gets Francesca totally fired up, and she says she definitely wants to set things up so they can add those flowers when the time is right. Salamander jumps in and says they'll just have to put in some serious work on the gardening then, and Francesca smiles and tells him he's right. She moves on to the final steps of the setup, noting that all she has left to do now is pour the water into the glasses. And then she pops open a can of air to finish it off, while Author Girl watches on, thinking the whole vibe feels just like relaxing with a drink after a long day. Salamander tells everyone to leave the fire to him, as Francesca mentions the very last step is just lighting up the candles. Francesca gives Salamander a quick thank you, and you can really feel the whole mood of the room change as soon as the fire starts glowing. Salamander is feeling pretty good about himself, laughing and bragging about how lighting a candle like that is basically a piece of cake for him. Lord Ark takes a look at the finished setup and gives a bit of a weak compliment, saying for a first try, it's actually not a half-bad result. Gnome isn't having any of that attitude though. He snaps back at him, asking why he's talking like that when the work is clearly top-notch. He tells Redodo he really needs to learn how to be more honest with himself, which just makes Lord Ark lose it and yell about how Gnome is being way too noisy. Salamander just watches the two of them go at it and sighs, thinking about how they're starting up with the same old bickering again. Salamander pokes at Gnome, asking the old man if he's finally going to call the others over, while Lord Ark realizes he totally forgot to mention something. So he tells Fran that if she's planning on adding any more food or sweets to the mix, she better do it right this second. He warns her that both Sylph and Undine are incredibly loud, and once those two start talking, there's pretty much no end in sight. Francesca realizes the situation with the spirits might be a bit intense, while Lord Ark just stands back looking totally stressed out. Gnome thanks Lord Ark for the advice and says he's going to go ahead and order every delicious thing he can find for the party. Then he calls out for Sylph to show herself if she's nearby, mentioning he has a really interesting girl here he wants her to meet. He doesn't stop there though, shouting for Undine to give him an answer too since she's probably just sitting around bored anyway. A voice suddenly asks the old man what's going on, noting how rare it is for him to call them out of nowhere like this. The spirit tells him she can hear just fine without him screaming at the top of his lungs. And right then, the air and water swirl together as two massive spirits show up, dwarfing everyone standing on the ground. Sylph leans her huge bird-like face down toward Francesca, asking if it was really a child of man who summoned them. Undine gets right in her face too, excited to see the person who called her since humans almost never visit this island. The water spirit keeps circling her, wondering why a human is even in a remote place like this, leaving Francesca completely at a loss for words. Undine gets way ahead of herself and asks if Francesca actually came to the island to be the Black Dragon's bride. Sylph thinks that sounds lovely and tells Lord Ark he really should have invited them sooner if he was getting married. Gnome finally loses it and tells them to shut up, saying they need to get their heads out of those romance stories, but the spirits just shrug it off, saying they can't help it since a good love story is the best entertainment there is. Undine keeps pressing, telling Francesca she better cough up some juicy gossip since she's finally here. Francesca notices Lord Ark's face getting scarier by the second, so she decides to introduce herself to fix the mood, bowing politely. She thanks them for coming to visit and lets them know her name is Francesca. She tells them she's put out some drinks and snacks, so they should just relax and make themselves at home. The spirits are totally floored by the snacks, looking on in awe. And while Lord Ark just sighs and walks away, Francesca leads her excited guests over to start the tea party. The spirits listen as Francesca finishes her story, and Undine says she gets it now while Sylph adds that she's definitely been through a lot. Francesca agrees that things were pretty rough back then, but says she's lucky to be living here under Lord Ark's protection now. As she looks off to the side, Francesca wonders to herself how many times she's had to explain her whole life story at this point. But Undine gets really worked up, saying anyone who could hear that story and not feel bad for her is a total piece of trash. Sylph looks pretty moved too, as Francesca realizes that both of them actually got angry and even cried for her after hearing how she ended up here. Francesca just smiles, thinking about how good it feels to finally have people around who actually care about her feelings. Lord Ark breaks the mood by asking if there are any more of those strange donuts left, leading Francesca to notice she's really taken a liking to the fried manju. So she tells Lady Arcuid that there's plenty more to go around. Looking at everyone eating happily, Francesca thinks about how she picked out these specific Japanese snacks and is just glad everyone found something they enjoy. The group keeps snacking away, talking about how the bean paste inside the crackers is perfect and how that sweet and salty mix is just the best. One of the spirits mentions that these snacks are basically a dieter's worst nightmare, and Fran just keeps eating, totally agreeing that the mix of bean paste crackers and manju is actually kind of terrifying because it's so good. Lord Ark picks up another one and asks if she's really that scared of a little snack, which catches Fran off guard, especially when he starts making that smug, mean face he always gets when he's enjoying himself, so she tells him to knock it off. She gets all dramatic about it, saying it's so scary she feels like she might just burst into tears if it stayed right in front of her. Lord Ark plays along, acting like he finally understands and asking if she's truly that afraid of the food. Fran yells out that she's definitely terrified, but Lord Ark sees his chance. He tells her she's wide open and gets ready to move. Before he can do anything, Fran stuffs a snack right into his mouth, leaving him surprised and barely able to complain about it. Fran just lays back feeling completely satisfied. The snack is perfectly fried and crispy on the outside while staying soft and fluffy, and the sweet bean paste just melts away, matching the rich dough perfectly. Lord Ark totally loses it and yells at Fran, calling her out for eating the snacks right after she said they were so scary. But Fran just laughs it off and explains she only put them in her stomach so she wouldn't have to look at them anymore. Lord Ark can't even argue with that logic and just groans. Author Girl jumps in to joke about the old story of scary mangas while Fran enjoys her tea, mentioning how the bitterness is the perfect reset after the sweet food. Lord Ark is still sulking in the background, which makes Gnome just smile and shake his head. He thinks it's pretty funny that a powerful dragon and a young lady are bickering like a couple of kids. Fran realizes she's making a scene and gets all flustered, apologizing to everyone for getting so carried away in the moment. She's definitely feeling the heat, but Gnome tells her not to sweat it. He says it's actually a great sign because it shows she's finally comfortable enough to be herself around them. One of the spirits giggles and says that watching the two of them interact makes it clear they don't have to worry about them getting along. Lord Ark just keeps eating, trying to act like he's not listening, while the spirit girl continues, saying it's actually really nice to see them able to just mess around and argue like that. She thinks this is way healthier than her bottling up her feelings and acting all nervous and restless like before, but all the praise just makes Fran more self-conscious. She's so embarrassed that she says she just wants to crawl into a hole and stay there. Lord Ark looks down at Fran and asks her where exactly she's planning on doing her gardening work, but Fran just gets all flustered and points to a corner of the hall, thinking it might be a good spot to start. Salamander can't believe what he's hearing and yells out, asking if she seriously wants to do it in here. He leans in closer to tell her that sunlight never reaches this deep, so she really needs to pick another place, and Sylph agrees, mentioning that they need a spot connected to the outside so the wind spirits can move around freely. Fran realizes she's in over her head since she doesn't actually know the layout of the cave or even what the island looks like, so Gnome asks about her situation, and she explains they were just dropped off at the cave entrance by people using teleportation magic. Hearing that, Gnome turns to Lord Ark and suggests that the big dragon should be the one to show her around the island. Lord Ark is busy stuffing his face and just snaps back, asking why he would ever bother doing something like that, which gives Salamander a huge idea, and he says that reaction is actually perfect. Salamander calls out the boss for sleeping the whole time and says if he doesn't move soon, his body's gonna get stiff, but Lord Ark just snaps back that he isn't that out of shape yet. Fran points out that since he missed centuries of sacrifices, he must have been out for a long time, and before she can even finish her thought, she gets snatched right off her feet. Lord Ark grabs her like a sack of potatoes, making her freak out and scream for him to wait. He's totally fed up and yells that he can't just sit around while everyone talks trash, so he starts stomping off, telling her he's only doing this once so she better watch closely. Gnome just watches them go with a smirk, thinking about how easy it is to bait the big guy, while Fran is hanging there totally embarrassed, begging Lord Ark to just put her down. She keeps insisting she can walk by herself, but he just tells her to shut up and stay put. Lord Ark is fuming, ranting about how his whole reputation is at stake if he doesn't do something about those insults. And even though Fran agrees he has a point, she's still freaking out and trying to get him to stop. She groans as he marches along, complaining that the way he's carrying her like a sack of grain is actually making her stomach hurt, so he shifts her into his arms for a proper carry and gives her a blunt apology. Fran gets even more flustered, yelling that this isn't what she meant at all because she just wanted him to put her down, but she realizes it's pretty tough to stay mad when he's being so unexpectedly sincere about it. He tells her she's way too fragile, and she just sighs, reminding him that regular humans aren't built like tanks, as they head deeper into the cave system, which looks like a massive labyrinth filled with narrow side tunnels. Fran is surprised by how huge the main path is, but then Lord Ark casually mentions he used to fit through here in his true form, leaving her completely stunned that a dragon that big could actually squeeze through these halls. Lord Ark leans in close to remind Fran about what he said before making it clear he's only guiding her to the exit this one time, so she better memorize every single turn. Fran is caught off guard by that, but she quickly apologizes for being such a burden and causing him so much trouble, only for him to admit that he's been asleep for so long he can't even remember when it started. He tells her that this walk is actually a good chance for him to get back in shape, and right then, Fran spots something and yells for him because she can finally see a light ahead. She gets super excited and points toward the opening, while Lord Ark just stays quiet and keeps moving. Fran keeps shouting that the exit is right there, so he tells her to quit squirming since he can see it too. They finally step out of the cave, and Fran looks totally happy just feeling the fresh breeze on her face, but the sunlight hits them both at once, leaving them squinting and groaning at how bright it is. Lord Ark is struggling big time with the sun, complaining about how it's actually painful and that his eyes still haven't adjusted to the light at all. But Francesca is loving it, standing there with a huge smile and telling him it's actually pretty nice once you get used to it. She gets super hyped and asks if they can start heading out immediately, which only earns her a frustrated groan from the Dragon Lord, who explains that while he could just change back into his real form and fly, it would be a huge hassle if people saw a dragon and tried to hunt him, so they have to stick to his human form. Francesca is still pretty confused though, asking if he's actually sure about going like this until he suddenly pulls her into a piggyback ride. She starts to freak out, but he just smirks and tells her she'll see for herself if it works. Right then, massive black wings sprout out from his back, and he tells her to stay quiet so she doesn't accidentally bite her tongue before they blast off into the sky. Francesca screams her head off as they fly, barely able to hear anything over the crazy wind rushing past them. A few seconds later, everything suddenly goes silent as the rushing sound dies down, leaving them hovering high in the air while some guy yells from below about how they were just messing with him this entire time. Francesca is completely stunned, staring down with wide eyes as she asks herself what she's even looking at. The landscape below is a crazy mix of green mountains, deep blue sea, and bright white sand, and she just can't get over how beautiful the world looks from up here while she hangs onto Lord Ark. Lord Ark looks back at her and asks if she really finds this kind of thing fun, and she immediately tells him yes. She's super happy and tells him she's grateful from the bottom of her heart for showing her this view. Lord Ark just scoffs, saying it's basically child's play and that from his perspective, humans are basically just infants. But Francesca is already off in her own world. Laughing and thinking about how great it'll be to start a garden, she starts looking for the perfect spot and asks him what he thinks about the location they're passing, noting that the area down there looks pretty open and easy to work with. Though she notices the sunlight is good, but realizes it might be too far from the cave to travel back and forth using her power. Lord Ark mentions they just need to go a little further through the woods, but Francesca realizes his idea of a short walk is way different from a regular human's. She suddenly spots a good area and points it out, asking if he thinks they could make that spot work for her garden. As she points out that it's right by the cave, she lets out a little yelp when they suddenly drop down. She's looking pretty frazzled and tells him she'd really appreciate a heads up next time since her heart is still racing from the shock. Lord Ark stands there with her and says he isn't sure how big of a garden she's planning, but he asks if this amount of space will do for now. Francesca is actually a bit overwhelmed and tells him that this is way more than enough space to get started. Lord Ark just gives a quiet grunt and looks away, making Francesca realize that he really does look out for her in his own weird way. She smiles, thinking he's probably just shy and stubborn, while the narrator girl pops in to call him a total tsundere. Francesca looks up at him and thinks about how happy it makes her whenever he decides to be kind to her, and then she starts walking around the area, completely amazed by the land they've found. Francesca starts walking around the area and realizes the ground is super soft. It's so fluffy that she's sure anything would grow perfectly here. Lord Ark asks how she can even tell since she's never actually farmed anything, which hits a bit of a sore spot for her. She explains that when she visited the territory, the local farmers told her that soft soil lets roots spread out easily so plants grow better. They spend all their time tilling and mixing fertilizer to get it just right. Lord Ark gets bored of the talk and suggests they just look around the forest since they're already out, leaving Francesca thinking about how he loses interest the second they aren't talking about food. Moving on, Lord Ark admits he didn't think there was much to this island, but it'll work for her walk. Francesca notices that even though it looked overgrown from the outside, the ground here is surprisingly flat and clear. Just then, Lord Ark stops and says it looks like something rare grew while he was asleep. Francesca is immediately curious. She figures if he's calling it rare, it must be something special, so she starts looking around. Lord Ark looks down and asks Francesca if she can't see what he found yet. She's looking around with huge eyes, totally excited to see whatever is out there. Lord Ark points a finger toward a specific spot in the woods, telling her it's just past that tree tangled in ivy, and right there is a tiny tree sapling running through the grass. Lord Ark explains that trees occasionally turn into these things when they soak up enough mana from the soil. The little tree guy trips over a vine and looks completely shocked. Lord Ark notes that, for a treant, this one looks like it was basically just born, so it's still pretty clumsy. He explains that they wander around looking for the best sunlight and food to grow fast, while the sapling just giggles and chases a butterfly. Lord Ark mentions that finding its own spot means it doesn't have to share any of the nutrients. The two of them stay back in the bushes, watching as a squirrel hops onto the creature's head. Lord Ark says these guys are usually peaceful, and as long as nobody messes with them, they won't ever attack. Francesca thinks this little monster is actually pretty heartwarming. She admits to herself that she's been a bit traumatized ever since a goblin was the first monster she ever met. She realizes that monsters have all different types of personalities just like humans do, while the sapling keeps dancing around with the butterflies. It hits her that having Lord Ark and the spirits be so kind to her is actually something really rare and precious. Lord Ark looks down and notices Francesca's expression, so he asks if something happened. Francesca admits she was just thinking about how lucky she is to be traveling with him like this, which makes Lord Ark smirk. He calls that a great attitude to have, though he's curious to see how long she can actually keep that mindset as they keep watching the little monster. Lord Ark is surprised the treant hasn't noticed them yet, while Francesca points out it doesn't seem to be on guard. He explains that even though it's technically a monster now, it started as a tree, so humans don't really understand how its mind works, but it's definitely a very tolerant creature. He describes it as being almost too generous because he once saw a treant looking totally depressed just because a little deer started snacking on its leaves and bark. Francesca is pretty confused by that. She thinks getting eaten should be a major emergency, not just something to be sad about, so she asks if the monster can just grow everything back as long as its roots are okay. Right then, the treant looks up in a panic. Lord Ark suddenly shouts for Francesca to get back as something fast heads right toward them. Lord Ark moves fast and pulls Francesca back, catching her right as she lets out a loud scream. She's totally caught off guard and looks over, asking Lord Ark what on earth is a massive bug monster, looking like a total nightmare and making everyone lose it. Francesca is shaking and can't help but ask again what that thing is supposed to be. So Lord Ark keeps it cool and tells her it's a giant longhorn, noting that it's actually pretty rare to see one that big. Francesca drops to the ground and yells that she just can't handle bugs like that, while Lord Ark admits he didn't expect her to get this worked up. She tells him to go ahead and laugh or call her pathetic, but she tries to explain that those kinds of bugs are just different, making her worry if she's even cut out for gardening anymore. She thinks ladybugs are fine, but this monster is a whole other level of gross, and soon she's completely spiraling. She can't stop thinking about things rustling and squirming in the dirt. Lord Ark just smirks and reaches out, saying that seeing Fran this shaken up is actually the most entertaining thing he's seen in a while. Lord Ark looks down at the defeated monster with a cold smirk, telling it to take this as a reward for being entertaining. He mentions it should be grateful to die without any pain. Francesca is a total mess of tears, yelling out a huge thank you for saving her while Lord Ark just closes his eyes, acting like it's no big deal. He tells her she's pretty hopeless if she's thanking him for something this small, but Francesca's attention shifts when she sees Wakage-san dancing around safely. She's just glad the little tree spirit didn't get hurt, and Lord Ark points out those giant bugs are always hunting for magic-filled trees. Francesca lets out a sigh, just happy they all survived the day, so Lord Ark looks at her with a much softer expression than before, asking if she's ready to finally head back. Walking together, Francesca checks if he's still planning to investigate that cave they found earlier, and Lord Ark agrees that it's the next logical step. He's curious to see which part of the temple it actually leads to. Later on, Gnome hears the news and smiles, realizing that Francesca finally found a spot that works for a garden. Francesca gets super excited and tells him the place is perfect. It's got all the sunlight she needs, and the soil is in amazing condition. Lord Ark and Francesca head back through the rocks, and she can't hide how hyped she is, pointing out that the cave connects right to her room, making the commute to her new garden a total breeze. A bit later, they're all settled in with some tea, and Francesca mentions how relieved she is to finally find the perfect spot, while the spirits start crowding around her. They're all curious, asking how the neighborhood looked and if she found anything cool while she was out, and they even check if she ran into anything dangerous, though they figure with the black dragon watching her back, she was probably fine. As she tries to take a sip of tea, Francesca suddenly feels something soft leaning into her. It's Undine, who's decided to just fly over and cling to her like a shadow. The other spirits aren't holding back either, getting so close they can feel the breeze from her eyelashes and even noticing how nice she smells, so Gnome finally steps in to play peacemaker. He tells them he gets that they're all excited for the story, but they really need to give the girl some space. Salamander backs him up, yelling that the old man has a point. She can't exactly tell them what happened if they're all smothering her. Undine gets defensive immediately, shouting that she doesn't need to be told what to do and claiming she's only there because Francesca looked like she needed some company. Gnome just holds onto the lizard spirit and sighs, telling them that all this yelling is only going to make things harder for Francesca in the end. The bird spirit tells everyone to stop picking fights, especially when they're dragging Francesca into the middle of their drama, which makes Francesca giggle because seeing them all bicker like this just reminds her of a big, messy family. Lord Ark holds up the lizard spirit and says it's great they found a garden, but he asks Francesca if she's actually picked out what to grow yet. So she starts thinking about her magic menu, remembering that it's mostly just for ordering finished food and kitchen supplies. But she wonders if there might be a hidden section for actual seeds or baby plants they could put in the ground. After scrolling through the screen for a bit, she realizes that seeds aren't part of the service and lets out a little sigh. One of the spirits points right at a picture of a potato on the screen, asking why they can't just take one of those and plant it. Francesca has to break the news that those are strictly for eating, explaining that using regular food as seeds usually leads to pests and diseases. And Undine listens to the whole explanation before admitting that this whole gardening project is starting to sound like a lot of work. Just then, Gnome steps forward with a smirk and his monocle shining, telling her that if it's seeds she needs, he's the one who can help. Francesca looks a bit worried and mentions that she already feels bad about needing their help to work the fields. But Gnome just smiles and tells her not to worry about it, explaining that anything growing in the dirt is basically his specialty. He says he's actually pretty interested in these kinds of crops anyway, so he just wants some samples for himself as a trade for his help. Then he grins and tells her if she still feels guilty, she can just pay him back by bringing him some new kinds of sake to try. Francesca's eyes light up at the easy deal, and Gnome just chuckles while asking if they've got an agreement, which makes her thank him right away before he tells her to go ahead and grab whatever she's planning to put in the ground. Undine leans in to look at the screen and wonders out loud if planting some fruit seeds would actually work out. Then she notices the lotus roots grow in water and gets excited, saying she can definitely use her water powers to help out with those. Francesca looks over her list and tells everyone they've finally narrowed the choices down to the best candidates. She tells the group they need to go check out the actual spots next, because the amount they plant is going to depend on how much room they really have. Gnome looks at the area and tells the group they need to focus on getting the land ready first, so Francesca steps up and tells everyone she'll lead the way to the specific spot she has in mind. She points toward a clear patch of ground and says it's right there, and Gnome looks around at the space, saying it's a really nice spot and the size and quality of the dirt look perfect. Undine gets excited when she realizes there's even an underground stream running right under them, and she says she'll definitely be able to use her powers here since she can hear the water, though she tells herself to stay calm and not get the wrong idea. Francesca agrees that the light and air are great and says she's happy they found such a good place, then gives Gnome a quick, "Yes, sir." Lord Ark reaches down to check the soil and notes that mana has actually soaked deep into the land here, because it's sitting right in front of the cave that leads to the underground temple, so he says it's pretty likely it's being influenced by that. He explains it's probably a mix of divine power from old prayers and the mana he's been giving off for all these years, making the ground something special. Lord Ark looks over the field and figures the place doesn't seem half bad for what they need, so he tells Francesca he's actually looking forward to what happens next, and she's right there with him, getting hyped to see how it all turns out. Lord Ark asks if the whole plan is really just about planting potatoes, but Francesca says that while that's true, Gnome is going to lend them his power. She adds that she's also thinking about planting some tomatoes while they're at it, though Lord Ark isn't sold, saying they're just tasteless vegetables in the end, but Francesca tells him he might be surprised. She mentions hearing that potatoes from another world are supposed to be delicious, but Lord Ark isn't budging, insisting a potato is just a potato and only good for filling your stomach. Francesca looks at him and really wants him to enjoy the spot since he's the one who found it, so she turns to Salamander and asks to borrow his strength, and the little guy is all in, saying he'll help with whatever she needs. While Lord Ark still grumbles about it just being a potato, Gnome takes a closer look and admits the quality is actually top tier. Gnome holds up a potato, getting all emotional as he thinks about the insane amount of passion and hard work people put into growing them. Francesca jumps in with a huge smile, reminding everyone that Lord Ark actually went through the trouble of ordering these specifically, so she suggests they should definitely have a taste of the food before they start planting the rest in the ground. She starts getting the prep work ready, mentioning she just needs to wrap the food in wet paper and then cover it with some aluminum foil. Francesca realizes the best thing to use would be newspaper, but after looking around, she sees they don't have anything like that nearby, but she manages to find some paper towels and a bottle of water to get the job done instead. Gnome watches her work, pretty surprised that the whole process just involves getting that white paper wet. Francesca explains that having water close by is a must for a new field, so she tells Gnome she's going to set up a watering hole right there. One of the spirits suggests they should start prepping the soil while they're at it, and Gnome is totally on board with the idea. As they get to work, Gnome hears a song and notices how sweet and clear the melody is while Francesca moves through the field. A strange sound starts to fill the air. It doesn't sound like any human language, but it's definitely coming from the spirits nearby. To Francesca, it feels like someone is speaking to her in a really gentle way. She closes her eyes and feels the sound deep in her soul, hearing a voice telling her to come closer. So when she finally looks up, she's totally blown away. She says it's amazing that they actually managed to make a whole field. Gnome looks pretty satisfied with the progress, telling her that they've basically gotten the main part of the job done, and the bird spirit mentions how great it feels for everyone to work together again. Another spirit adds that the mana in the soil made everything super easy, but Gnome thinks the garden still looks a bit too plain for a lady, wishing he had some metal to build a cool fence. The other spirits start planning more, talking about adding flowers by the spring and letting the wind carry seeds everywhere, making Francesca wonder if she's dreaming. But she stands there with Lord Ark, feeling a bit overwhelmed. She tells him she feels guilty letting the spirits do all this work by themselves. Salamander just brushes it off like it's nothing, telling her that this little bit of work wasn't even enough to get him warmed up. Francesca realizes that for the spirits, making a whole garden is as easy as yawning. Even though it's no big deal for them, she still feels like she needs to contribute. So she decides the least she can do is get some tea and roasted sweet potatoes ready for everyone immediately. She grabs her supplies and calls out to the group, letting them know she's got tea and snacks ready so they can take a break while the potatoes finish roasting. The spirits get all hyped up, asking if they really get to eat more of her delicious cooking. It's a perfect day for it, and Francesca tells them that since the weather is so nice, she thought they could just have a full-on picnic with sandwiches. She starts listing everything she brought, like 3 appetizers, 2 kinds of baguette sandwiches, some pastries, and even a salad quiche, a main dish, and some seasonal fruit for dessert. One of the spirits is totally blown away by the massive spread. Francesca thinks to herself how convenient it is that the picnic basket comes with all the plates and silverware already inside, making Lord Ark pretty happy when he spots meat in the basket. She smiles and tells him she's definitely giving him an extra large slice. Gnome looks over the whole setup and is honestly impressed with how much variety she put into the meal. Looking at the spread, Francesca notices there are even petty cakes mixed in, making it impossible to decide which one to try first. The group gathers around the blanket, everyone agreeing that the food looks amazing and that Francesca's cooking skills are honestly pretty fascinating. So Francesca tells everyone to just go ahead and help themselves to whatever they want from the pile. As they start eating, Francesca breaks into a fresh baguette and just breathes in that savory wheat smell. It's like a dream come true for her. She can't help but think how this is a total world apart from that hard, sour bread she used to have to soak in soup just to eat back at the Duke's mansion. Lord Ark looks over at her with a smug little grin and says it looks like she's actually improved quite a bit since they met. And Francesca gets all flustered, snapping back that she can totally slice a baguette sandwich all by herself now. One of the spirits takes a massive bite and completely loses it, yelling about how delicious the food actually is. She's shocked by how the thick, gooey cheese just melts on her tongue, especially since there's none of that weird funk you usually get with cheese, and even little salamander is stuffing its face, thinking about how perfectly the cheese goes with the saltiness of the ham. Francesca looks at the tiny salamander in total shock, wondering how on earth he's fitting all that food into such a small body. But the fire spirit just gives her a look and reminds her that his true nature is to burn, melt, and devour everything he sees. Francesca just smiles and pets his head, telling him that as long as he's with her, he's just her little cooking buddy who helps her grill stuff, and he's totally down for that. Gnome takes another bite, mentioning how the mix of the firm shrimp and the soft veggies makes for a really cool contrast, while Lord Ark and Francesca just relax and enjoy the vibe. Francesca starts eating too, noticing how the homemade butter makes the flavor seep out with every single bite in a way that's just amazing, and she realizes Lord Ark was right. The texture of the whole thing is actually perfect. Between the rich, creamy avocado sauce and all those crunchy vegetables, the balance is hitting just right. And even though it's packed with flavor, the fact that it still tastes so light and fresh is what makes it so good. Gnome is basically in heaven over the consommé jelly, loving the way that slippery texture just melts on his tongue, so he doesn't even hesitate before deciding he's definitely going to have another one. Gnome takes a bite of the terrine and says it's honestly just as good as the rest of the meal. And Francesca explains that it's basically a salad trapped in jelly, so you get all those different vegetable flavors at once, which makes the whole thing look pretty cute. She watches them eat and thinks to herself how happy she is that things besides the sandwiches are actually a hit. Then she turns to Lord Ark and asks if he's down to try some of the roast pork, and he tells her yeah. Lord Ark realizes that pork means it's from a pig, and he starts wondering if this is going to taste better than the beef they had yesterday. As she starts cutting into it, Francesca mentions that since it's a completely different kind of meat, it really just comes down to his own personal preference, but she points out that there's actually a surprise inside. She stuffed the meat with a mix of apples and plums. Lord Ark looks at his plate in total shock, unable to believe that there's actually fruit hidden inside the meat, so Francesca just gives him a look and says he might find that he actually really likes it. Lord Ark goes on to admit that until he finally met her, he had never even tried eating meat that was cooked before. Francesca gets super fired up and says that in that case, she's going to start ordering even more kinds of meat dishes, and she mentions she's positive there are plenty of other meals he'll end up loving once he actually tries them. Lord Ark looks pretty happy as he admits there are probably tons of foods out there he hasn't discovered yet. Then he tells her he expects her to keep working her hardest for his sake. He takes another bite and realizes that the combination of meat and fruit actually works surprisingly well together. So Francesca tries some herself and is blown away by how good it is. Even Salamander is busy stuffing its face, while she says this is a first for her too. She closes her eyes to really take it in, tasting the sweet juices from the meat along with the sharp, crisp flavor of the apple. And she notices how the dried plums have soaked up all those flavors to become rich and plump again. The savory sauce really just ties the whole thing together, leading to Francesca feeling like she's literally in heaven. The taste is so good she feels like an angel floating through a field of flowers. She's completely shocked by the flavor, and thinks to herself that she has never eaten anything quite like this before. Francesca is still pretty impressed with the food. She mentions how the meat stayed juicy even though it was cooked through. Taryn pops in to explain the science behind it, saying the fruit enzymes are actually what made the meat so tender. Even Lord Ark is feeling the meal. He says that while he's heard stories about human life, he's never seen anything like this before. Gnome is busy eating too, mentioning that everything they've had so far is just way too fancy and delicious. He notices the cooking methods are way different than what he's used to, and it's making him curious about their kitchen tools. Francesca tells them she's just honored they liked it, while little Salamander keeps calling out to her from the ground. She looks over at the campfire where things are heating up and says it's finally about that time, so Gnome agrees with a happy look. He can already smell something amazing coming from the fire. Salamander warns her not to get burned, and Francesca says they definitely can't get hurt before the real fun starts. She reaches for the cooking fork and gets ready. It's time to see what else they've got cooking in the fire. Francesca checks the food with a fork and sees it went right through to the center, so she says it's finally ready. She tells Salamander it's exactly what she expected from him, but the little guy just laughs and tells her to stop. He's blushing like crazy and says if she keeps praising him for something this small, he's going to get a big head. Gnome looks at the plate she's holding and asks if she can actually tell which potato is which, and Francesca thinks back, explaining that if she remembers right, the smaller ones are the moist kind. She keeps going, saying the big round ones are the fluffy kind while the long thin ones should be the sweet potatoes. Gnome looks over at Lord Ark and calls him out for making that face again, asking what he's so unhappy about. Lord Ark just sits there and says he doesn't like them because potatoes are hard and no different than stones. Francesca gets this look of total shock and asks him if he's seriously been eating his potatoes raw. She starts panicking a little and tries to reassure him, saying it's okay because these ones are properly cooked. Francesca isn't having it and yells that she absolutely won't let him eat anything raw ever again. Gnome just shrugs it off, saying since her husband is a dragon, eating raw meat and everything else is just how it goes. Francesca is still totally frozen from that husband comment, while Gnome asks if that isn't just the deal with wild animals. Lord Ark looks pretty annoyed at being called a wild animal, but Gnome points out they don't exactly get to be picky eaters. Moving on, Francesca shows off the seasonings she brought and says that even though salt is a classic, she had a better idea. She explains that putting a little bit of butter on top makes everything taste way better. She opens up a jar and the smell is so strong it hits Undine immediately. She asks if it's some kind of fish sauce made from squid. Francesca tells her she nailed it and explains that it's called shiakara, which is actually made from squid. Lord Ark looks pretty curious as he repeats the name of the sauce to himself, and he says he actually remembers hearing about some other fish sauces called gyros or garum way back in the day. Francesca thinks to herself that making your own seasonings from whatever you have around is really the way to go. But Undine points out that the sauce Lord Ark mentioned isn't just some old recipe. It's a legendary seasoning from thousands of years ago. Suddenly, everyone starts freaking out because the food is way too hot to touch, and Francesca has to tell them to wait. Lord Ark looks pretty worried and asks her if she's actually doing okay and if she can even handle food that's burning like that. Francesca just brushes him off, saying a little heat is no problem and it actually makes the food taste better. But truth is, she's only doing fine because her barbecue skill luckily counted cotton gloves as a cooking tool right at the last second. She holds up the snack with a huge smile, calling it a lovely and plump little golden sweet potato while everyone watches. Then she starts the final touch by dropping a single pat of butter right on top of the steaming potato. The group is totally blown away by how it looks, with Undine saying it's like water hitting golden sand as the whole thing starts sparkling, making that dry, powdery texture turn perfectly moist the very second the butter melts in. Francesca finishes the dish by pouring that thick, legendary squid sauce right over the golden potato. She tells everyone she's going in for a bite while the whole group watches her with their breath held. The taste hits her immediately, bringing out the earthy flavor of the potato mixed with a deep scent of the sea. It's perfect because the outside is nice and moist while the inside just falls apart, letting the salty squid umami mix right in. She's actually shocked because despite the strong ingredients, there's zero fishiness to it at all. It makes her wonder if butter and potatoes are just so versatile that they make anything taste like a dream. Sylph can't handle the silence and starts blurting out questions, asking if it's actually good or bad. Lord Ark just watches her and points out that Francesca seems to be having the time of her life. He can tell she's completely lost in the food, and at this point, she's not even noticing the people around her. One of the spirits gets those big sparkling eyes and suggests they all dive in and try some for themselves. Sylph is absolutely loving the food, shouting about how amazing it is even if the presentation is a bit messy. She says these potatoes have a flavor that's totally on another level compared to what she's used to. Salamander isn't letting them off easy though. He calls the group out for being too scared to try it until Francesca took the first bite. Lord Ark joins in, talking about how the savory taste and the crunch of the squid go perfectly with the potato base. He describes the whole thing as a perfect match between the land and the sea. Francesca repeats the words to herself, feeling the weight of the compliment while she looks at everyone eating and realizes how crazy it is that ingredients from such different places can taste this good together. She agrees that it's a special combination, a real win for her cooking. Moving on, Sylph takes a closer look at the dish and notices just how deep the colors have become, and she mentions it's now a bright, beautiful yellow, comparing the whole thing to a sunflower in full bloom.